Good evening. Good evening? Evening. Evening? It is the nice and good evening. It is evening time. It is egged o'clock. Egged PM. Eggy standard time. I guess because it's daylight saving, so it's eggy daylight time. In the Eggstern, I'm on the Eggst coast. The pun doesn't even sound right. I mean, 8. You can't spell 8 without like at least 2 of the letters in egg, right? It's EIGHT, so it's egged. Egged. It is egged o'clock. That's the point. It's egged o'clock. Daylight saving, yeah. Like, are we not still in something like Eastern Daylight Time? To be honest, I didn't even realize there was a difference. Oh, glasses on. Thank you for letting me see. I didn't even realize there was a difference until like Bloom. I started looking at Bloom's schedule, and for some reason, Bloom is like really intent on having like Eastern Standard Time and Eastern Daylight Time on them being like 2 different things. So I didn't even realize until I saw his schedules. I'm like, oh yeah, I should probably switch ? I mean, it doesn't really matter if you're like in a time zone that does daylight savings, because then it's just the same. But I guess if you're in a time zone, or if you live somewhere where they don't do daylight savings, then it's like, oh yeah, this is gonna be back an hour or forward an hour. I forget. Late o'clock. Yeah, EST and EDT are different things though, right? Yeah. Because like one of them is off by an hour from the other. Yeah, ET is neutral. I mean, I suppose I could just say Eastern, but like that's too many letters and I don't have that much space on my schedule. Usually I just put like, that's why I put like the acronyms. Like I need as few characters as possible. But yeah, late o'clock. It's not that late. I don't know. I mean, considering that lately I've been streaming mostly in the mornings, this is quite late. Yeah, everyone uses EST. Nobody likes putting UTC. I mean, honestly, I admire the people who put multiple time zones on their schedules. Like, they're like, oh yeah, this is like this time EST, this time in West Coast time, like this time in like Japan time. Just give up. Europeans. Just give up on Europeans and learn the difference. Yeah, I don't have time for spelling it out. I want to know. I wouldn't exactly call it spelling it out. It's just kind of like, the risk of getting it wrong is very high. That's the issue. The risk of getting it wrong is quite high. But yeah, I just put in... I guess I could also do the thing, like, you know, I've seen some people where they're just like, all times are in this time zone, so then you don't have to put it on every single thing. Just Google it. I mean, yeah... Honestly, like, considering that I still can't remember if daylight savings, it's spring forward, fall back. But I can't remember if that means, or wait, no, you gain an hour in the fall, I think. Yeah, 1 p.m. EDT and UTC, it will tell you. Okay. But, yeah, is that something you actually want me to do, though? To, like, put multiple time zones on the schedule? Because, like, I can try to do it, but I can't guarantee I have space. Especially if it's, like, the game I'm playing has a long name. Yeah, Europe switches a week later, because of course they do. Because of course they do. We can't have things be convenient, can we? But yeah, no, because, like... Oh, yeah. Hold on. You gain an extra hour in the fall, because I remember one year, like, the first year, like, 2020, I remember watching... the Halloween special and being confused about how they could be like streaming, because I think Mori had a new song that was premiering at midnight, but then they also had a stream that was at midnight, and I was confused because I'm like, oh, how is that possible? How can she be in 2 places at once? And I realized it was 2 midnights. Yeah, late night egg. Is this a late night? It's only like 8 p.m. I'm kind of tired. Like, okay, I think I'm remembering why I used to stream, or like why I stream in the mornings now, because like, why go on stream and complain about being tired when you can simply wake up and do the stream before you get tired? Ever thought of that? Yeah. But yeah, late night egg. But yeah, good morning. Oh my god, I'm still in like morning stream mode. Good evening, Palish. Hi. But yeah, people in the Americas rarely seem to notice how late they are just for streaming in Europe. Yeah. I remember once I watched a streamer in Europe, and he was streaming at like, for me it was like 8 p.m., which was like a reasonable evening time. But then for him it was like 2 in the morning. Like, it was really, really late. What if one is always tired? Well, you just gotta find the time when you're the least tired. You gotta go around. But yeah, all hail the wiggle. Yes, thank you for wiggly praise. Yeah, it's past midnight here, so technically it's a morning stream. The very, very early morning. Yeah, 5D chess. I mean, it's morning somewhere. It's morning somewhere in the world. Somewhere in the world, this is a morning. Hello, Ed. Thank you for wiggling. Thank you for wiggling. Wiggling is very important. But yeah, no, so it is 8 a.m. here. Yeah. So I'm assuming you're in, like, somewhere in Asia, I'd assume. Just based on time zones. Or Australia, maybe. But yeah, you're right, it's morning. Yeah, see, I told you, it's morning somewhere. But yeah, Sunday streams at Monday 3 a.m. are fun. But yeah, no, it's always morning somewhere. I feel like there's a lot of, like, Japanese VTubers that like to watch more, except that I'm being rated. No, it's not because of that. It's because they stream at, like, afternoon Japanese hours, but it's like, 3, 4 in the morning for me. But yes, welcome, True Kaiser. Hold on, I have not started anything. Maybe I should spell that right if I want it to work. There we go. Yes, welcome to Eggy Stream. I haven't started Menhera Raid. Yeah, Japanese VTubers' late hours are more accessible from Europe. Yeah, well, I remember reading somewhere that, like, Ina's audience, at least until Kiara moved to, like, back to quote-unquote Australia, Ina's audience was, like, disproportionately European. Not necessarily because anything about Ina really appealed to Europeans, but because she just happened to be the only one who was streaming at hours that were convenient to Europeans. So usually she would just end up with more people from that time zone in her chat. Yes, Wiggly working it like he got bills to pay. No, the Wigglies will never have bills to pay. The Wigglies can live freely in a utopian Wiggly society. But yeah, North America gang rise up. I mean, I am in North America, so they will, by definition, end up in the North American time zone. Yes, Inahu, Ninamai Inanis of Hololive English. Ninamai Inanis. Ninamai Inanis. Ninamai Inanis. But yes, so this stream does have a point. I'm gonna open my slideshow up in a little bit. So this stream. Oh, thank you, Haj and Dot. Thank you for sprouting. Yes, this stream does have a point. So, tonight is... I just realized I didn't make text for this. Lolita Fashion Zatsu. So, as you might have noticed by the everything about me, I do both in VTubing and in real life wear Lolita Fashion. I have been doing it for a while, and I like talking about it. I feel like I end up talking about it on stream by accident just because it comes up in conversation, but I do like to talk about it on purpose. So I have a slideshow. This stream is kind of a... Okay, so first thing about the stream, this is actually not really a rerun, but I had done a stream like this way back in November, I think. It was like one of the first streams I did after my debut. It was way back in November. And I'm doing it again, partly because I've added things to the slideshow. There's new information. I've gone back and redone some things, but also just because a lot of the people who are here currently, many were not there yet back in November. So I figured I would do it again because I want to do it better. And also because I forgot to back up the VOD I forgot to back up the VOD for the first one. So, redo. Slideshow, yeah. Closet full of Eggy College, are you accredited? I mean, I can't say I have a degree, but I am quite educated. I would say I'm quite educated in the topic. Yes. Do you have a closet full of Lolita clothes? I'm sorry. I'm like staring at my closet, like my actual closet in the corner. Yeah? Yes. You see, the difference is I keep some of it in drawers. Some of it has to go in the drawers. One of my friends literally cried to me. She was drunk, saying that she hates being tall because she can't wear Lolita fashion. Well, I don't want to say skill issue, but there are workarounds for that. I will talk about that later. But yeah, do you upload all the VODs to YouTube, or at least via Twitch? The thing is, no. And that's the problem. Usually I have a tendency to, well, because I used to try to archive everything, and then I quickly realized that is really annoying. So I have some really, really old VODs archived, and then I have like my debut archived, and then I don't archive entire karaoke VODs, but usually I'll like cut them up into clips and archive them like that. So, because the thing is that I feel like most of my streams, oh, thank you, Ed the Nerd, thank you for sprouting. Most of my streams don't feel worth archiving, if that makes sense. Like, obviously, some of them do, but then some of them are just like, I played Animal Crossing today, again, and it was fun, but I don't think anybody, the Twitch VOD will expire eventually, and I don't think anybody's going to be searching for it very much after that. But yeah, except the karaoke. Yeah, I know karaoke too can also be a huge, huge pain for archiving just because of music DMCA copyright, which I already deal with on some of my clips. I haven't had anything like taken down or blocked, but I have had some things that are demonetized, which is, to be honest, fine considering I don't make any money off the YouTube channel. But yeah, no, it's yeah. Yeah, later you might want to make a clip out of something, but it's gone. I mean, that's true, but I think the thing is that when I started trying to archive everything, I used to have really, really, well, I mean, you guys all know, I had really slow internet and I didn't have a good computer. So the time it would take to either export the VOD to YouTube or to just download the VOD and then re-upload it was just it was an obnoxiously long time, especially for something that I probably wasn't going to go back and rewatch, and not many people were probably going to go back and rewatch, so yeah, it costs nothing to keep them unlisted. That's true. But yeah, Twitch can upload them directly. I guess if they're unlisted, because the thing is that I wanted to be able to control what the title is and what the thumbnail is, which I don't know if you can if you upload it directly from Twitch, but I guess if they're unlisted, then it doesn't really matter. Okay, so I'm going to jump to the slideshow. Slideshow. So yeah, when conventions were a thing, which I guess they are again, I used to do panels on this a lot. Oh, I should turn on music. Hold on. Give me a second. I had music set up, and then I forgot to press the play button. There we go. Oh, that might be a bit loud. There we go. Now I have BGM. Is the volume for that okay? You're not going deaf, and I'm also not making you deaf. But yes, Fashion Professor Eggy. Yes. So yeah, this is kind of like a not shortened version. Well, actually no, it's the opposite of shortened. This is like a lengthened version, because panels you got a time limit. You only got that room for so long, but here, this is my channel. I can't be kicked out of my own channel. I can go as long as I want. Or at least until my phone dies, I suppose. But maybe a tiny bit quieter. Okay. But yeah, it's good. So yes, this is Absolute Beginner's Guide to Lolita Fashion. So, okay, so there will be, pictures of me at various points in here, because I have no way around it. I just need to show that I know what I'm talking about. So, if if there's a problem with that, then it's a skill issue, I guess. So yeah, these are a few chords. These are mostly from I think these are all from 2019. I think when I made this slideshow back in November, I didn't have a lot of recent pictures, so yeah, these are all from 2019. So yeah, this is just sampling to show that I know what I'm talking about. But yeah. Eggy, cute. Thanks. So panels would just have your photos. Yeah, usually. I think panels... Because the thing is when doing panels, when I used to make slideshows for those, usually I would either try to use myself or, like, people I know, just because I didn't want to have to deal with, like, getting permission from random people. Like, it's one thing if you, like, Google a photo and just be like, yeah, I found it on Google, but sometimes if you're, like, going into people's Instagrams and using their pictures for your slideshow, then it's kind of weird. Oh my. Egg. Yes, this is egg. Behold, egg. Okay, so I guess the first thing to mention is just some, like, actual... Oh, thank you, Auxilia Gino. Thank you for sprouting. Just some, like, definitions. Lolita is cute. It is, and that's why I enjoy it. And that's why I had an entire live 2D outfit made for it. So, I'd say that I think it has... So this fashion has multiple... kind of inspirations, if that makes sense. I think a lot of people kind of attribute it to historical fashion, which I don't think is always the case. I like to describe it as like historical fashion from like a non-existent era. So you kind of got a mix of like goth fashion, visual kei, especially like gothic Lolita has a lot of those influences. Shoujo manga is like a surprisingly big one that doesn't really get like acknowledged a lot. Usually Rococo period, which is kind of like, you know, Marie Antoinette kind of pre-French Revolution kind of styles. Usually this is the big one that people point to as an influence for this, but I wouldn't say it's actually the biggest, because I feel like in there you also have some Victorian styles. So I feel like if you're looking into it from like an actual historical fashion angle, those are probably the two eras it comes from the most. But I don't know. I think is Lolita culturally considered retro nowadays? Not really. People seem to like, they like to say that it like, people have been rewriting like the obituaries of various Harajuku fashions for a very long time, and yet they are surviving. So I wouldn't say it's retro, no. I think certain things would be considered like outdated, but not entirely dead. So Wikipedia Lolita fashion is a subculture of Japan that is highly influenced by Victorian clothing styles in the Rococo period. Yeah. Well, I feel like aesthetically it resembles Victorian styles a little more, but I also think that like in terms of mindset and like maybe philosophy is a bit of a high, like a, you know, a bit of a snooty sounding word for it, but like, you know, the thought process behind the aesthetic choices, I would say, is more of feels more rooted in Rococo. I think the other thing is there's also like other reasons why Rococo is usually more associated with it, but that has more to do with sorry, I'm just like resizing this so it shows up properly. Here we go. There was a movie that came out. Well, there was a book and then there was a movie based on it called Kamikaze Girls. And there's a character in the story named Momoko, and she wears Lolita fashion, and she's obsessed with the Rococo period. So I think that's where, like, most people make the major connection. But, yeah. Should fashion be the male counterpart, or is that a thing? No, there is something like it, but it's not called that. It's called something totally different. Well, I'll talk about it more later. And then another major influence, I think, kind of also flies under the radar sometimes, is a lot of 1950s and 60s styles. Like, if you look at a lot of kind of like 50s, 60s retro kind of vintage stuff, it has a lot in common with like a lot of modern things. Like, not necessarily in terms of like necklines or like the shape of the dress, but like, you know, the way things are worn, or like kind of the vibes, the prints, it's more influential than I think a lot of people think. OG, yes, OG, that's the word you're looking for. Also, some punk influences. Again, more so for gothic, and this is more highlighted in like the early days of the fashion. But yeah, basically you got to put all these things in a blender, and then blend them a little bit, and blend them some more, and there you go. You got it. That's all your influences. So I guess to just go into the history of it, this fashion is a lot more recent than I think a lot of people think. It's hard to say when exactly it started. But yeah, as the slideshow says, like, roots of the fashion, it began kind of to show in the 70s and 80s. It didn't take full shape until the 90s, and it didn't solidify into like an actual aesthetic with a name that could be like easily pinpointed until like the early 2000s. So throughout the 70s and the 80s, I guess both in Japan and abroad, there was kind of this like interest in there's always been kind of like an interest in feminine things, and like you can go way far back to try to like pinpoint like the beginnings of like shoujo like kind of aesthetics. But yeah, usually 70s and 80s you can see a lot of like this very feminine influence. So here are two outfits actually. So here's, well, an outfit and then a dress. So this first, this is a magazine cover of the fashion magazine called Olive. I believe this cover is from the 80s. But if you look at kind of this silhouette here, it does look like a kind of, like you can see the shadow. You can see the shadow of a Lolita outfit, you know? An egg at this hour? Localized entirely in this stream. Yes, at this hour. It's not my usual hour anymore, but I figured for like a stream like this, it might be a better hour. So yeah, you can kind of see like the faint shadow of a cord. And also this dress on the right. I believe this one is from I swear to God, I hear about this brand all the time. I have no idea how to pronounce it. It's either Gunsax. It was a brand, or I guess it's still around, I think. It's a brand that made a lot of like very prairie dress looking kind of things. That was kind of their specialty. Laura Ashley, I think, was another brand around the time that did something similar as well. So again, this was kind of more stateside, but you can see the influences in Japanese fashion as well. It's kind of actually similar to what you're seeing right now. Like if you go into like H&M or Zara or any like fast fashion place, you see a lot of dresses like this. Like probably not up to this level of quality, but like this is pretty similar to what you're seeing in like a lot of mainstream like fashion in our year of our Lord 2022. So yeah, this is kind of like the early thing. Like you get a lot of like this roots of like kind of prairie dresses, kind of again, this is like the 50s, 60s aesthetic. Kind of it is a little more, I don't think avant-garde is the word for it, but like it's almost like people are dressing like shoujo manga kind of thing. Specifically, there's two styles that I guess can be pinpointed from this era. So Natural K is kind of probably what the dress on the right falls more into. Natural K was like a style that was popular in kind of like 80s, early 90s. That was, yeah, it was pretty much like prairie dresses. Like, so that being said, it's interesting because that kind of style was actually apparently more popular among housewives or like adult women. Like it wasn't like a thing that younger girls would wear. It was something that like married women, like married housewives would wear, like, because they were things that were like nice enough that you feel all nice and frilly, but also, you know, plain and practical enough that you can still, you know, cook and clean and whatnot while wearing it. Sensei, what does K mean? K is like, technically in Japanese it means like style or like feel or like vibe. So you see a lot of Japanese fashions named this way. It's not always something having K at the end. Like sometimes I think the most prominent example would be like fairy K, which is like, you know, fairy vibes kind of thing. So a lot of the times when people are talking about like specific aesthetics or like fashion subcultures, they'll just be like blank K. It's also the same K in like visual K. Yeah, for whatever reason, because everybody here likes to sound like weebs, we just imported the term K when we imported all the other fashions. The other one that you'll see is otome, and I think otome is like a fashion that's a little harder to like track, or like it's not, I find it's not as distinctive looking as some other like fashion substyles or like subcultures. So otome was kind of also evolving in the 80s. That's probably what the outfit on the left, what that would fall into. Otome literally means like maiden. No relation to otome games, which, I mean, I guess it uses the same word, but and yeah, so maiden style was kind of that same kind of, you know, innocent, young looking shoujo anime looking kind of fashion, you know? So again, this is what things were like 70s and 80s. So then you go into the 90s, and this is where like you can see the aesthetic starting to take a shape, but like it is not a fully formed fashion yet. Like here, these are some outfits from kind of early and mid 90s. I don't know exactly what years these were, but yeah, so you can see, again, if you compare this with like, you know, your average modern Lolita kind of outfit, they look pretty close. Like, they're not quite there, but they look pretty close. Card captor core. Yeah, kind of, except card captors didn't exist yet. More like, I'd say think more like, I don't know, 60s and 70s shoujo manga has like a very, like, specific look to it. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but I feel like if you go back and look at a lot of illustrations from that time, like, you get kind of the look they're going for. So yeah, so you can see in the 90s, so these are some outfits. Some of these are actually, I believe some of these pieces are from brands that, while they weren't considered Lolita brands yet, I believe they would later. But yeah, you can see kind of a lot of common elements that you still see today. So you see, like, you know, the layering, like you have the cardigan on top of the blouse, you got the very like frilly kind of look, you got things on the head, like you got a lot of head bows, the Peter Pan collars everywhere. That's also a thing. The lengths of the skirts, the fact that there is like visible leg wear, like you can see it forming, but it's not like, it's still a bit of a blob. Like there's just no distinct silhouette to it yet. So then you have the early 2000s, and this is kind of where things actually start moving. One major development of the early 2000s is that the Gothic and Lolita Bible. But oh my god, why is that? This should not be a difficult thing to say. Hold on. I'm gonna drink some water. The Gothic and Lolita Bible begins publication. So this was a not monthly, I think it was like 4 times a year, like seasonally publication. And yeah, it was basically exactly what it sounds like. It was a magazine about Gothic and Lolita fashion. I think it was a little more Gothic when it started, and then became a little less Gothic as time went on. But yeah, the nice thing about Gothic and Lolita Bible is we now had a better way to document outfits. Quarterly, yes, that's the word I was looking for. Quarterly. 4 times a year. So there was now a better way to document outfits. Because the problem that we have with these things before is that, and I think we don't think about this a lot nowadays, because everyone is documenting everything on social media all the time. Like, historians looking back on current year will have absolutely no trouble trying to figure out how people this year dressed. Because everyone's taking pictures. Like, there is just an aggressive amount of documentation about, like, every possible niche thing ever. But, you know, before that, before the internet, there wasn't really much documentation for super niche subcultures. Because, like, obviously for more mainstream fashion, you had bigger magazines, but even among, like, more niche stuff, it was a little harder to really get a grasp on how people were dressing, you know? So, there were magazines, obviously, that specialize in, like, Harajuku style, like, you know, alternative fashions. But, you know, not all of them were focused specifically on Lolita. And the other problem with that too is that, like, for instance, I'm pretty sure these photos, I'm pretty sure, were taken from a magazine called Fruits, which was a magazine that was known mostly for its street snaps. So, like, they would, you know, go out to Harajuku on a busy night, and then they would find people with cool outfits and take their picture, and then publish that in the magazine. So the thing is that this kind of thing was always going to come down to the taste of the photographer, right? So, like, if the photographer does not have any interest in this kind of aesthetic, then it's just not going to show up in the magazine very much. Yes, Lolita Zatsu. Hello, Comfy Cal. So yeah, this was the first time that there was, like, a magazine with actual, like, documentation of this fashion specifically. So the nice thing too as well is that the Gothic and Lolita Bible wasn't just street snaps. There was also, like, you know, advertisements and, like, here's the new dress releases for this season from this brand. So it makes it a lot easier to track, like, what people were actually wearing at the time, what brands were selling, like, what, you know, and as well as some other lifestyle things. So, like, you know, what was the hair and makeup like at this time, or, you know, how did people generally feel about this thing or that thing? It gives a better snapshot. So finding pictures or, like, getting an idea of, like, how things looked is a little easier from here on in, because there is an actual, like, specialized publication to document things. So at this point too, the fashion kind of has taken its own shape. So, like, as you see earlier, like I mentioned, these outfits have, like, similar elements to them, but there's no clear silhouette. There's no clear, like, form. But as you can see here, the fashion has become a little more, maybe not uniform. I don't think uniform is the word for it, but, like, notice how these outfits generally are shaped the same. Like, if you were to do the thing where you, like, cut them out of the photo and, like, paint over it so it's just a silhouette, you would be able to see the resemblances, right? Lolita fashion, variant of Vogue, and there's a specific design language. Maybe not variant of Vogue, but, like, it was specialized. That's the point. Because I think the other thing too as well is that fashion in general, because, like, it's one thing to look through magazines and see what people were wearing in the magazines, but sometimes too, like, in the past, people might have taken pictures of their outfits for, like, personal use, like, you know, just to keep around, but it's not like social media where, like, people were sharing their outfits. So here, I think, as a magazine, it did a better job than anything else before. By curating, they were also kind of defining what was and wasn't Lolita. Yeah, I mean, yes, but I wouldn't say the publication had that much power. I think another thing, though, with the documentation of outfits is always to, like, when they did street snaps, because when you do street snaps, right, like, you want to find outfits that look interesting. You want to find stuff that's kind of breaking the mold of what's usual. So by doing that, in the moment, you're, you know, taking pictures of things that are unusual. But sometimes when people go back, we don't know what the normal people were wearing, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's like, who's that Pokemon? Yeah. So now this Pokemon was more definable. So now you can see you kind of have the silhouette of, like, you know, the big collar, big hair or big head accessory, I guess. Puffy dress, big shoes were another thing in this era. I feel like that's something not enough people talk about, but, like, yeah, early 2000s, even late 90s too, like, look at their shoes. Everyone's wearing just the biggest possible shoes. Like, they weren't exactly, like, heels or big platforms, but they were just big shoes. Everyone just liked big shoes. I mean, big shoes are good, but, like, we were on some, like, Kingdom Hearts. We were at Kingdom Hearts level back then. Were there fashion shows? Yes. I think they became more of a thing later, but I'm not sure if there were that many at this time. I'm sure there were. I think the other thing too is, like, you can also track kind of the progression of brands over time. Because obviously brands would advertise their stuff in magazines like this. So you can see, like, either ones that started small and then became more successful, or you can find ones that were, like, kind of, you know, brands that kind of were around in the early 2000s and then died out later. So, like, you can kind of track the progress of this kind of thing. It also helps to kind of track the progress of trends. Like, you know, what was in this season. It makes it a lot easier than to try and, like, search through ancient blogs and stuff. Maybe Nomura was into this stuff. Honestly, like, that might be Disney influence. I mean, it's not like nobody has ever taken influence from this specific publication. Like, I remember watching a video about how some of the characters in Umineko, if you look at the outfits they're wearing in Umineko, you can actually, like, I think it was Umineko. It was a visual novel. I'm pretty sure it was Umineko. But, like, you could go back and find, like, the exact outfits in the Gothic and Lolita Bible that each of these things were based on. Like, it's... They pretty much just, like, lifted it entirely. It's actually kind of funny. Here you go. More water. So yeah, that's kind of the defining thing of this era, is that, like, we now have a distinct aesthetic, and we now have a name for it, I guess. I don't know when the name was coined, but I'll talk about that later. But yeah, I'd say this era as well has definitely, like I said, like when the Gothic and Lolita Bible had first premiered, when it was first published, it was very, like, it leaned a lot more on the Gothic end. And I think, like, Visual Kei had a bigger influence at this point than it does currently. So you can definitely see that, like, a lot of Gothic brands are bigger then than they are now. And, like, the dominant look was very, like, frilly and very, you know, girly, but, like, it was also kind of dark and Gothic and, you know, Visual Kei looking. So then we get to kind of the mid to late 2000s. So we're kind of approaching current era, but not yet. So one thing you might have noticed in the previous examples is that the fabrics here that were used previously are either one solid color, or they have a print, but it's a fairly, like, you know, generic print. So you might have, like, you know, gingham or checks, or, like, this one has flowers, but it's more of like a gobelin kind of look than it is, like, actual print. So one big major change around, I don't know who made, like, the first, like, actual printed dress. Some people say Angelic Pretty. I don't think it actually matters. It doesn't matter. But it's, yeah, basically around this time, I think around, like, 2006-ish, I'd say, is when, like, the shift is really visible. Prints tend to become more common. So when I say prints, I don't just mean, like, fabric with a pattern on it. I mean fabric with, like, a specifically drawn custom pattern on it. So, like, for instance, on this dress, you can see it's along the hem. Like, this is the new dominant meta here in the year of, like, 2006 or 2007, is, like, have a print, but have it mainly along the hem. Like, it's a custom print. It's not like it's, like, generic flowery fabric. It's a custom print, and it's along the hem of the dress. This is what things look like now. It's hard to say. A lot of people attribute this to Angelic Pretty. I don't know if that's entirely correct, but yeah, this is the new meta. Do you have one that looks like that? Like, which one? I don't own either of these dresses that I use as an example. Those are both Angelic Pretty, I believe, but most of the dresses I have, like, most dresses nowadays look more like this. Like, they are, like, entirely printed, but the print is mostly concentrated towards the bottom of the dress, because that's where people are looking, right? So that's the one major change in this era. I'd say other major changes are more in, like, not necessarily in how the dresses look, because the shape kind of stays the same. Like, you look at the outfit, the example outfit here, and you compare it to the ones here, there's not a lot of changes in terms of, like no one's rocking the boat in terms of, like, the shape of the dress, right? But yeah, love all the hats and the accessories in general. Hats are good. We'll get into hats later. But, I mean, hats were kind of always a thing. They're not in either of these pictures, but, like, headwear is a big part. But yeah, more changes are kind of just in how they're worn, I'd say. And the other thing that I like to point out as well is that the shoes get less chonky. Here we get, like, a bigger variety of shoes. I think in previous times, like, the shoes were very big. That seemed to be just, like, a regular thing, but you can see in this era, like, the shoes are getting smaller, the shoes are getting more elegant. Chonky shoes still exist, but, like, they're not nearly as common as they used to be. Like, they're no longer the default. That's the point. So then we move on to early to mid 2010s. Some people say this trend kind of started as early as 2009, which sounds about right, actually. So this is what we call, like, the sweet boom. And I think this is one of the things as well that happened both in Japan and abroad a little bit. Everyone just really got into sweet. Everyone just got really into pastels for a while. Hi, Eggy, it's been a while. Hi, Frying Pan. I know, for some of you, I know it's been a while because I haven't been streaming. Like, I switched my time slot, so I know some people are coming back for the first time in a while because, you know, this is the first time in a while I've streamed in this time slot. So, for those not aware, my new time slot is mornings, 10 a.m. around. That's my new time slot. I'm having a much easier time streaming when I first wake up than trying to do things in the evening. But I figured I'd do this in the evening. So yeah, this is early to mid 2010s. This is, yeah, what people call the sweet boom. So, like, everyone just got really into pastels for a while. For a while, like, you know, previously, you know, Gothic was more, not in style, like, other forms existed, but it was just not that popular. But no, here, everyone got really into pastels for a while. Angelic Pretty, which is a brand that specializes in this kind of style, got incredibly big. It still is incredibly big. But yeah, that's kind of the dominant trend. It's just everybody got really, really pastel all of a sudden. People still like the pastels, but I don't think it's that popular anymore. Mentos color language. Yes, for a moment, we all became sweet tarts. But yeah. It's still fairly popular. I feel like this kind of look still exists. Some people still wear it as... Some people, for, like, you know, they just like it. Some people wear it kind of for nostalgia reasons. Because this is also, especially for people overseas, this was a big era for foreign expansion. So, obviously, there were people wearing the fashion all around the world before this, but I think this was kind of the time where it became a lot easier and a lot more accessible. So this was kind of, I believe this was the era, I don't remember off the top of my head exactly when Baby, the Starshine Bright, which is another major brand, and Angelic Pretty, I don't remember exactly when they started opening stores overseas, but it was sometime in the early to mid 2000s, or early to mid 2010s. I believe it was like 2013 or 2015, something like that. But yeah, this is kind of the era where brands realize that there are customers abroad who are trying very hard to buy their stuff. But so yeah, this is kind of an era of foreign expansion. Another thing that starts to happen here, it has not hit its full peak yet at this point, but Taobao. So Taobao, for those not aware, is basically, it's kind of a mix of like Amazon and eBay and Etsy. It's from China. So basically it's like an online shopping platform. And some brands from China start to become very popular from selling on Taobao. So the thing is that a lot of early Taobao stuff was kind of associated with like poor quality. Because people are like, it's Chinese knockoffs. But there's a few brands, like I think this is the era where Antaina, which is like woman, it's a major, not major shoe brand, but like it's a big brand for that kind of thing. This is kind of when a lot of those brands start starting up and becoming more popular. So yeah, I was into pastel fashion for a while, then it somehow turned to pastel goth. I'm Chinese, so my parents buy a lot of stuff from Taobao, and it's actually quite good quality. Yeah. I think I will talk about this later. I'm getting to it. But like, China has been like a big asset to this entire subculture. So the other thing about this era that I think nobody talks about is that wigs and makeup, like hair and makeup, just get absolutely massive in this era. Like, look at these pictures. Like, everybody here in these pictures is like half a step away from becoming a gyaru. Like, look at these wigs. Anybody who tells you that a wig is mandatory for a cord probably started wearing the fashion in this exact era. Like, This is kind of the era where like big makeup becomes popular, like heavy blush, heavy eyeliner, big eyelashes, circle lenses. Like everything gets really big here for no apparent reason. You can see in the past, like there was never really a specific makeup style associated with it. You can see like kind of the heavy blush has kind of always been a thing, but usually the makeup, with the exception of like more visual K influence stuff, the makeup typically would trend kind of natural, like pretty light, like not like this era where we just went absolutely ham. Yeah. Nothing is actually mandatory. It's more of a majority thing, so people think it's necessary. Again, I'm getting to things. Okay, so this is more recent years, so I'm saying current era is like 2015 onward. Obviously, things have changed a lot since 2015, but you know, to try to summarize the last 7 years? 7 years. Some dominant trends that I've noticed are... Okay, the first one I've noticed is pulling influences from other styles. Obviously, that's nothing new. Like, people have been basically doing that the entire time. But you can definitely see it more prominently. So, like, the dress here is definitely pulling from a lot of, like, menhera kind of style. That's the most prominent example I could come up with when I was making the slideshow. But you can definitely see people pulling inspiration from different places. Another thing that is a little, maybe not new, but like popular, is kind of a rise in popularity of what's called OTT, or over the top, which is basically just like exactly what it sounds like. Like it's, you know, make things big and super frilly and giant. In the past, it was most popular to do this with, you know, pastel kind of stuff, but it wasn't as popular to do it with like more gothic or basically anything that wasn't pastel. So that's become more popular in recent years. It's like this kind of like, you'll see on the right, like this big cords, big outfits, lots of details, exhausting to wear, but not in pastels. Another thing that's been notable in recent years is the absolute explosion of popularity in China. From what I've been told, I don't think people have entirely, like, processed how popular this style seems to have gotten in China. Like, I know some people who have, like, either lived in China or been there recently, and they're like, oh yeah, there are, like, places in, like, shopping malls that just sell this stuff. Like, there was an Angelic Pretty store, I believe it was the one in Shanghai or Beijing. There was an Angelic Pretty store that, like, had lineups. Whenever they do a new release, they would have like massive lineups of people trying to get in. Like, it's big, and because of that, as I mentioned before with Taobao, a lot of like smaller brands and more independent brands have started popping up, which means it's a lot more accessible because a lot of these brands are a little bit cheaper than your average like Japanese brand. But also because there's more variety now. And I think it's always good to have more variety, and also different places in the world, because they're going to be taking inspiration from different things. So I think that's been like a huge boon and asset. Yeah, probably not the most prioritized thing in the media to cover in the West. It's a shame. Honestly, I feel like there's so much content that is just absolutely like... I know there's like entire magazines, like there's Lolita magazines, there's like Lolita YouTubers, like I feel like there's an entire sphere of content that's just completely inaccessible to everyone outside of China, either because of like, you know, Chinese media site blocking rules, or because of like language barrier rules, because there doesn't seem to be a lot of people out here translating this kind of thing, just because there's not that much interest. So yeah, I walked past the Angelic Pretty store you're talking about right now, and I was like, they sell this stuff? Yeah, you can buy it. For enough money, you can buy it. But yeah, no, I feel like popularity in China has been like a huge thing that's, you know, kind of just made everything a little bit more accessible. I think another thing too is a rise of indie brands outside of Asia. So this picture at the bottom here, this dress, is a dress from a brand called Violet Fane, which is based in Spain. So you start to get a lot of these smaller indie brands from you know, the US, from North America, Europe, basically places that are based outside of Asia. So outside of like the usual culprits when it comes to like people making clothes like this, you start to get more brands just getting more popular. So some of these brands have gotten popular for their aesthetics. Some of them for their like, a lot of North American brands, I find specialize more in like big size ranges. So some of them will make stuff for like plus size and such. Yeah, Violet stuff looks neat. I really like it. Otome Nostalgia was probably their most popular print. It came out kind of at the tail end of 2020. And it got so popular that they basically started an entire like sub-brand just to like cater to that specific niche that they just kind of accidentally invented. But yeah, Bilibili has lots of content. I can imagine. It's so difficult to use, and I imagine it's probably really difficult to search, and no one's subtitling this stuff. So people who speak Chinese, I don't know, get on that. Is there a Lolita subgenre that incorporates Gyaru makeup styles? Sort of. Again, I'll get to that at the very end. The answer is not really. There is a very similar substyle of Gyaru that looks similar to Lolita, but it's not quite the same thing. But honestly, if you look at a lot of 2011 stuff, like I said, everybody in this era was like 3 steps away from being a Gyaru. Like, the hair and makeup just got really big, and then it went back to normal a few years later. So, like, it's not impossible. That's the point. I think one YouTuber talked about looking for specialized commercial wok cooking instruction videos on video sites and found this until he looked at Bilibili. Yeah. Like, I imagine there's like a lot of content just in general that's just like stuck on Bilibili, trapped on Bilibili, never to be translated. Yeah. Gyara's not my cup of tea. Yeah, same here. Like, again, I feel like the crossover, well, I don't know. It's hard to say what the crossover between people who wear Gyaru and people who wear Lolita is. It's not that big, honestly. They're both Japanese alternative fashions, but I feel like they stem from very different influences in very different places. And as such, it makes it really hard for someone to feel like they can properly fit into both, I guess. So yeah, that's kind of been what's happening recently. Another thing too is resurgence of old school. So I think old school, I'll talk about it later. It's basically just like Lolita Y2K. It's basically just like people trying to kind of recreate the looks of the early 2000s. So that's kind of been falling back into fashion, but I feel like that's not really specific to Lolita. Like, I feel like Y2K everything has just kind of been coming back, and I feel like, you know, we are not immune to the early 2000s. So that's kind of where we are now. So question number 2, since we now have answered, oh boy, now that we've answered this, question 2, what isn't Lolita fashion? So this is going to be a quick one. This only has like 1 slide in it. So this is just a quick overview of what it isn't, because people tend to get this wrong a lot. There's a lot of misconceptions about this. So the first thing that it isn't is a costume. Some people kind of wear it in a way that might feel costumey, but you're not trying to dress up as anything, right? Like, sometimes you'll have themed outfits, so, you know, you might look a little maidish, or you might look a little sailorish, but you're not dressing up as a maid or as a sailor. Like, if someone comes up to me while I'm wearing a cord, and they say, hey, what are you dressed up as? The correct answer is, like, myself. Like, you know, I'm me. I'm the Eggy. So, oh, whoops. Where am I? Okay. So that's kind of the first thing it's not. The second thing it's not is a maid outfit. For some reason, maid outfits are just like super conflated. PP Eggy. PowerPoint Eggy. PP Eggy. I don't know if I like that. But yeah, maid outfit. It's not a maid outfit. It has never been a maid outfit. Maid outfits are kind of more of a otaku, like Akiba kind of look. For some, because they're both frilly, a lot of the times there tends to be a lot of like association between the two, but it is not that. It is not that. Maid outfits are not, Bobeba! You know, somehow, I thought you would come here. somehow, time to egg. Time for egg. You know, somehow I thought you would come here. Let me shout out the rat. Underscore rat. But yes, hello, Bobeba. You know, somehow I thought you'd raid into this. Somehow I just knew. But yes, welcome, Bobeba and Bobeba enjoyers. But yes, time for egg. So yeah, we were just going through Lolita fashion. This is like the same slideshow I had used when I did this same kind of stream back in November, but I did add some things at the end. So I gone through the history kind of so far, as well as like more recent trends. So yeah, what isn't Lolita fashion? It's a good stream. Everyone needs to know what's Lolita and not. Exactly. There's more. I will get more detail. So yeah, second thing of what isn't Lolita fashion. Yeah, it's not a maid outfit. The two are conflated, I guess. They're both based on historical things, sort of, but very loosely. They're both frilly, so I guess I can see why people mix them up, but they're not. If you go to a Lolita meetup in a maid costume, people will look at you very weird. Third thing is it's not a fetish thing. People get super weird about this all the time. A quick and easy way to get kicked out of any Lolita community or event is to make it a weird sex thing. Like, people have to... You would not believe the amount of work we have to put into this to, like, not make people think we're weird. Like, I think part of it... Yeah. Local Lolita groups here are absolutely cutthroat, but damn, they have great clothes. Yeah, I mean, again, I'll get more into, like, comms. Again, everything people are saying, I'm like, no, I'll get into that later. I have a slide about this. But yeah, no, people get very weird about it. Again, I think part of it is just kind of this assumption of, you know, when people just, like, see a thing that they don't understand what it is. Or, like, this happens a lot with basically anything, like, women do. But, like, you know, when you, like, people will see a woman doing something unusual, and they're like, could it be that she enjoys this for another reason? And they're like, no, it must be a weird sex thing. It can't possibly not be that. So I feel like this kind of falls into that as well, where, again, people just see a woman doing something unusual, and I guess just don't know how to not be weird about it. Yes, a lot of people know Lolita isn't, like, kind of from the book. They don't know about the fashion they associate with that. Funny you mentioned that, because that's actually what my next slide is about, I'm pretty sure. Yes, the name. I can assure you that everybody also hates the name. I actually try to use the name as little as possible. Half the time when people ask about it, I just say, like, half the time I just say frills or, like, poofy dress. Like, I try to use the actual name. I know that's not the dominant opinion, I think, but, like, I personally do not like the name. But on the other hand, what are we gonna do? Like, change it? It's been, like, 20 years. Like, playing furries and bronies for making everything weird is also weird in a sexual way. But the difference is that that's like a fandom thing. This is a little different. I mean, to be fair, I feel like the same thing kind of happens with, like, goth girls and, like, punk girls and emo girls and, like, basically anyone involved in an alternative fashion will get this to some extent. It's just that we seem to, I guess because of the name, we get it a little more aggressively. Poofcore. I mean, people have tried to change the name in previous years. I think somebody tried to call it, like, Cointrell or something. All the name changes have been just absolutely garbage and abysmal. I know some people have tried to call it EGL. Some websites will use EGL, which stands for Elegant Gothic Lolita, but the problem with that is that not everything is Gothic. And also, if people ask what does EGL stand for, you still gotta tell them. So it's not... Yeah, it's not an ideal solution, but it is a solution. So anyway, it's not entirely clear where the name comes from. That's the main issue, though. So there's a few theories. Some of them are just like Japanese people name things without knowing what the words mean, which, okay, sure. There's a few more, like, specific ones that kind of are very, like, a long and winding path. I know I was reading an article about how it seems like we kind of got from, like, Lolita as in the book, and then it got, like, turned into, like, after the book was published, then people were writing about, like, Lolita complex and, like, psychology books, and somehow that got, like, that leaked into, like, some other things, and, like, Alice in Wonderland was in there somewhere. Like, we were, like, 3 steps away from accidentally being called Alice K, probably. So it's not entirely clear where the name came from, but it's pretty much agreed upon that the name was definitely not coined by somebody within the fashion. Chances are it was coined by... Oh, did my sound alerts break? I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. Can I offer you a nice egg? I'm sorry, the sound alert isn't working. Hello, XL. But yeah. Ah, there it is. It's just slow. There we go. It's just a little slow. But yeah, Alice in Wonderland is weirdly big in Japan as well. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of very much this, like, it's not clear where it came from, but it definitely wasn't within the fashion. But we're just stuck with it now. We're just stuck with it. The other thing, too, is that, like, it seems to be pretty much entirely divorced from the term lolicon. Like, again, it's not entirely clear where the term came from, but it seems to have developed separately from it. I know as well for English speakers, a lot of English-speaking Lolitas will spell it with a lowercase l to try to differentiate it from the novel. And I know some, like, Japanese Lolitas have also, like, instead of writing it in the usual way that the novel would have been written, they write it slightly differently, like with, like, a different, like, they write the katakana a little differently, to try to differentiate it. But, you know, it doesn't always work. It's not universally applied, I don't think. So, weirdly enough, I'm pretty sure that the Chinese name for it, like, has absolutely nothing to do with the Japanese or English term for it. Soft sister is, like, the term that I've heard used in Chinese, which honestly sounds a lot better. Like, petty K, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it's the idea of a British girl wearing traditional garb. Very cool, cute, and exotic. Yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, it's hard to track where these things come from, but we're just stuck with them now, I guess. Every time somebody asks what we're wearing, it's time for everybody to, like, play a tennis game of trying to, like, get the other person to tell random strangers what it is we're wearing. So, yeah. That's the point. No one knows why. No one's 100% sure where it came from. Definitely from outside the fashion. We didn't name this ourselves. Moving on. So, the thing that a lot of people think about when it comes to this fashion is, like, the quote-unquote rules. So I feel like when it comes to the rules, I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about them. Because the thing is with Lolita is it's actually, this fashion is quite diverse in terms of, like, actual aesthetics. So I think a lot of people think about Lolita, they have, like, a very specific image in their head, but you gotta deal with the fact that in this fashion, like, oh, thank you, Coran Force, thank you for spreading. Like, you look at all these pictures here, every single one of these pictures here is Lolita. Like, you know, this pink frilly stuff is Lolita, and this, like, darker gothic thing is also Lolita, and this, like, more elegant, like, more historical looking thing is Lolita, and this, like, kind of classic Lolita silhouette is Lolita, and this sailor outfit is Lolita, and this big princess outfit is Lolita, and this more, like, punk looking thing is also Lolita. So the rules of the fashion, a lot of people think it's just to, like, limit what can be done with Lolita, but if anything, I think it's more just, like, what are the unifying elements tying all this together? Like, kind of what makes this fashion, yeah, oops, all Lolita, yeah. It's like, how can, like, what are the unifying elements between all this? What makes Lolita Lolita? So, these rules are not actually super strict. As I like to explain it, it's not like, if Lolita, then it must contain this, but more it's like, if it contains these things, then it is Lolita. So it's kind of to define the look, rather than to limit what can be done with it, or to try to, like, gatekeep what is and isn't. Which, I mean, I guess there is a little bit of that, but, you know, if everything is Lolita, then nothing is Lolita. So you do need, like, some standard, but, you know, it's not as strict, I think, as a lot of people think. It also helps to just kind of put pattern recognition into words, and for, like, helping people who are new to the fashion, who might have not, like, picked up on kind of the aesthetic intricacies, to figure out, you know, what this is supposed to look like. Yeah, there has to be some gatekeeping to keep the identity of fashion alive. Exactly. So, like, yeah, I think a lot of new people usually are told, like, okay, these are the rules, follow the rules. But that's just kind of to help you figure out how to do things before you know, experiment with new ideas or new styles. It's just to help figure out the basics. So, rule number 1, I think, that is there across all styles is sort of modesty. So, like, obviously this style is not modest, because, like, modest has, like, 2 definitions, right? You have, like, modest as in, like, not yabai, and then you have modest as in, like, you know, normal and sensible looking. So, obviously, it does not fall into that second definition. Yeah, rules are a guide until you're experienced enough to break them. Exactly. And I feel like that's the way with a lot of things as well, you know? So yeah, the first rule is modesty. So it's modesty in terms of the, like, cover your boobs, not modesty as in, like, don't look too spectacular. Please look spectacular. But usually, because like I said, we have enough people, as I mentioned in this slide, we have enough people being weird about this style. We don't need to make it any worse. So a lot of it is, yeah, no booba. Necklines are usually pretty high. Skirts are kind of usually knee length, sometimes a little longer, sometimes a little shorter, but somewhere around the knee. Yeah, there's usually leg wear. Like, you don't wear a lot of you don't see a lot of bare legs, I don't think. Yeah, just don't show the booba. No booba. Nopers. No booba. So, like, yeah. So from some weeb looking examples, here's some top anime girls of 2009 here. Haruhi is doing it wrong, Azusa is doing it right, mostly. So you can see here, like, Haruhi's, like, boob window, that's not really a thing you see. And her dress is probably a little shorter than what most dresses would be like. Whereas Azusa, she got the high neckline, she has, like, the sensible knee length. I'm 90% sure I know exactly which clothes this outfit was based on. Like, I think I've seen these exact boots in real life. But, yeah. A classy amount of skin. I don't know if classy is the right word for it, but, like, basically not more than necessary. And sometimes, like, you know, there are ways to skirt this. Like, sometimes people are just tall, and the skirt will look short no matter what. That's okay. It happens. Less is more. Like, it happens. Sometimes people have big boobs, and they lean forward, and the boobs might show a little. It happens. Sometimes people are differently shaped. But, you know, it's the thought that counts. It's the thought that counts. The second rule is that skirts need poof. So this is kind of the second defining look, like, I guess defining trait of the look, is, because if you look at all these, like, all of them have different degrees of poof, but they all have poofy skirts. That's, like, the main thing people know about this fashion. So the skirt shape is usually achieved through a petticoat, but, you know, some people use hoop skirts for reasons beyond me, I guess. I don't know, I guess they're useful on a hot day. But yeah, petticoats are basically just, like, a skirt that has, like, it's a very fluffy fabric and it has a lot of layers, so it makes your dress very puffy. The poof doesn't need to be huge, it just needs to be there. Yeah, all dresses need to have at least a little poof. Some of them have huge poofs, but not all of them. Sometimes hoop skirts are a thing if it's hot out, but I wouldn't say they're not nearly as common. There's actually 2 common shapes of skirts as well. So I have an example of each. So this one here is, like, I just realized I said the red one, but they're both red. The one at the top here, this is what's called a bell shape. So you notice it looks like a bell. I know I've seen some people call this cupcake shape as well. Because I guess it looks like the top of a cupcake. It's kind of that rounded look. Then the dress down here, this one's called A-line because it looks like an A. It's kind of like a more, it looks like an A. It's a straighter shape, I guess. If you use the wrong kind of petty on the wrong kind of dress, it will look a little wonky. There are workarounds, like, you know, if you move your bell-shaped petty a little bit down your waist, it'll look okay with an A-line dress. Some dresses can actually kind of work with either. A lot of tiered dresses are like that. But, yeah, these are the two basic shapes. The one time I tried a petticoat, the poof bounced way more than I expected. I was really surprised. Yeah. It's fun. It's like, woo, 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 woo. I think I have a video somewhere of me when I got my first petticoat. I just, like, went in front of a mirror and just, like, shook myself around a little to watch the petticoat go, like, poof, poof. A cone? I guess a little bit. Kind of an upside-down cone. A-lines look better on most people. I mean, I think it depends, because I think A-lines aren't as common as bell. I'd say bell is definitely, like, the dominant shape. I think the thing with A-lines is that, I don't know. A-lines, I think, too, are also more common in other fashions. Like, if you look in a lot of vintage fashion, this kind of, like, straight line is a lot more common than the bell shape, but yeah, I want to try wearing a poof dress. You can. What's a panier from the Japanese Oh, panier, panier is basically just another word for petticoat. It's the word that's more commonly used in Japanese. But yeah, it's the same thing. I don't know why they went with that one, but I guess petticoat doesn't, like, roll off the tongue quite right in Japanese, I suppose. Yeah. But yeah, I wouldn't say, I don't know. I think I have a couple of A-line dresses. I think my problem with A-line dresses is just that, like, they're more likely to have, like, really tight-fitting top halves. Whereas I find that, like, for whatever reason, every time companies, like, make dresses with, like, more forgiving bust areas, it's always a bell shape. I don't know why. But yeah, there's some dresses, I think, too, that work with either. Like, I think if you have, like, an empire waist dress where the waist is, like, really high up, usually that works with either. Same with, like I said before, like, dresses with tiers, like, you know, like a tiered cake, but, like, tiered dresses usually can work with either as well. But yeah, so third rule, number 3, is just kind of general balance. And this is the hardest one to master because it's not entirely clear. It's not like the first two where it's like, okay, don't do this, don't do this, do this. This one's a little more nebulous. But usually there's kind of a lot of attention paid to balance, both in terms of color and in terms of, like, shape. So obviously there's always got to be a headpiece, but that's usually to balance out, you know, the fact that the dress is gigantic, right? And usually there's a lot of attention paid to balance in terms of color. So, like, you see in this, like, very simplified sample here, like, pink bow, white blouse, pink dress, white purse, white socks, pink shoes. Like, there is, like, 3 items of each color. Like, obviously this is very simplified. Most dresses obviously have prints. Most accessories have different colors, but it's very balanced. Everything is there to kind of balance out other things. And this is kind of the hardest one to master, but, you know, it's a little more nebulous than the other rules, but it's still important, I think. So here, just before I move on, because I'm going to be speaking a lot of nonsense, so before I move on, here is just a list of nonsense. Yeah, you treat the outfit as a full composition. Exactly. Like, you know, big headpieces are there to kind of counter the gigantic skirt, and, like, you know, the top half, there's usually people will have a lot of details in their outfit on the top half to kind of balance out, you know, everything that's going down here. Like, everything is made to balance out something else, right? So, important vocabulary, some of which I've used already, but in order to not speak any more nonsense, I will teach it. So, cord, spelled with 2 O's, it comes from the Japanese term kodo, which is short for coordinato, which is short. It comes from the English word coordinate. It's an outfit. It's literally just an outfit. It's the word for an outfit. Usually, it's the term people use more often versus outfit. For whatever reason, I guess we're all just weebs. People will say cord, I think, for other J fashion styles too. So I think it really is just it's just a weeb thing. It's like people insisting on calling it, like, anime, no matter what. It's like, it's not Japanese animation, it's anime. We have to use the Japanese word for it. Nice cord, bro. I mean, honestly, I call every outfit a cord now. Regardless of if it's, like, Japanese inspired or not. It's like, sweatpants cord. Yeah. So, second term is Ida, which is basically just Lolita but bad. It can be used as an adjective or noun. So, the word Ida comes from, obviously the word Lolita, so it's like the end, but also comes from the Japanese word itai, which means ouch, or like painful. So, yeah, it comes from that, and it's basically, I guess, the idea is like, you know, a Lolita that is painful to look at. Like, it's something that looks so bad that it's painful to look at. It can be an adjective or noun, like someone can be an Ida if they dress badly, or somebody can, like, you can describe a certain piece of clothing as Ida, or like a certain type of style as Ida. Ida confused me a lot since I know about Ida bags first. Yeah, no relation to Ida bags. I guess Ida bags also comes from Itai, but I guess it's more like an ouch my wallet kind of thing rather than like ouch my eyes. Or Itasha. Yeah, as well. As like, well, I guess that one's also like ouch my eyes, but it's more like I'm being assaulted by anime girl rather than like I am being assaulted by bad fashion. But yeah, no, it's kind of an insult. Don't call people that. It's not nice. But it is a word that's useful to know. Next one is brand. Capital B brand. Sometimes people like to joke around and be weebs and call it burando. But usually when people talk about brand, like capital B brand, they're usually talking about one of like the bigger Japanese brands, although that's becoming more nebulous as time goes on, like which one of these is considered big. But yeah, historically that's usually what they mean. So when people talk about brand versus off-brand, which is the next term, usually they're talking about like, yeah, big Japanese brands. Burando, yeah. I don't know, I've used burando. I'm like, ooh, people are coming over, let's pull out the nice burando. So yeah, off-brand is anything that isn't brand. And also not Taobao for some reason. I don't know why. I think off-brand was kind of a term coined, at least for English speakers, kind of coined in the early days before smaller indie brands and like Taobao brands were really a thing. So like back in the days where your choices are like big brands or nothing, off-brand usually just meant anything that wasn't from the big brands. So nowadays, Bodyline, yeah, I guess. Well, I don't know, Bodyline is kind of its own beast. But yeah, when people talk about off-brand, usually people will use this term nowadays when they're doing like outfit rundown. So they're like, oh yeah, my dress is from Angelic Pretty, and my shoes are from Antaina, and like, but then people will usually say off-brand if they're like, oh yeah, I bought these black tights at like Costco. I don't think anybody cares where I got them from. I'm just gonna call it off-brand, right? So why no indie Lolita? It does exist. Brand or whatever you found at the thrift store, exactly. Brand or stuff that you can make yourself. Why no indie Lolita? It does exist. It does exist. Smaller brands exist. It's just that when these terms were coined, they didn't really exist that much yet. Like, there was obviously some of them, but like, and I think too, a lot of what people think, because obviously you have big brands like Angelic Pretty or Baby the Starshine Bright, that people are like, yes, these are big brands. But then you have some brands that are like, people consider it brand despite the fact that these are technically much smaller brands. Like, I'm pretty sure you have brands like Mary Magdalene, which I'm pretty sure was just run out of like someone's apartment. They're very small brands by like most standards, but for some reason people consider it brand. I have no idea why. The standards are quite nebulous. I know some people who just consider any Japanese brand to be brand, except for Bodyline, I guess, which is a weird standard. It's a very nebulous term nowadays, I think. But yes, no. Bobeba remembers. The elderly Bobeba remembers. Next term, casual, exactly what it sounds like. Basically just like Lolita with a couple things taken off. Yeah, the standards are, is it Japanese or not? Or at least that's how it used to be. Yeah. I think too, though, in recent years as well, I feel like because Taobao and like Chinese brands and as well as like international indie brands have really like stepped up in quality, it's hard to differentiate, right? Because sometimes like I mentioned before with the Violet Fane dress, like there was a lot of hype for the release of Otome Nostalgia, if I remember correctly. But Violet Fane is not a Japanese brand, and I wouldn't say it's even that big of like a brand in general. But yeah, and you see a similar hype about some Taobao dresses, or it's not quite at the same level of hype as, you know, international brands, but like, yeah, people, it's a little more nebulous, I think. Yeah, my friends used to go to Japan to try on the 1 to 2K dress brands. How much money for a single piece of clothing dress? 1 to 2K? What were they trying on? They must have been trying on like the fashion show dresses. Most dresses usually will fall, like, from the major brands, most dresses will usually run you somewhere between 200 and 500, depending on, like, you know, how complicated the dress is. 1K or 2K, like, maybe if you're buying, like, some brands have made, like, wedding dresses or, like, dresses specifically for, like, fashion shows and stuff. Those will be more expensive, obviously. But I don't know. Usually 300 to 500 is usually the pretty safe zone. I think I saw, like, a wedding dress that was around 700. I mean, to be fair, wedding dresses, even, like, normal wedding dresses are hugely expensive. So I feel like 700, compared to some regular wedding dresses, might actually be a steal. So, next term, OTT, which is short for over the top. I believe I talked about this earlier. It's exactly what it sounds like. If casual is, like, taking off a couple accessories, over the top is just, like, add more accessories. Yeah, normie wedding dresses so much. Exactly, I know. It's like, they know you're probably only going to use this once, and they know you're going to spend as much money on it as possible, so might as well charge you as much as they can. To be fair, that's in Australian dollars. Ah, okay. Yeah, I'm talking more in, like, Canadian or American dollars. Or, like, yen, I guess. But yeah, no, 700 is probably fairly inexpensive by, like, normie dress standards. Another term that probably isn't going to come up much here, but is useful to know, is MTO, which is short for made to order, which is basically a pre-order. A lot of brands will do dresses like that, where they'll do, like, limited releases, where they'll, you know, you pre-order it ahead of time, and then you get your dress whenever it's made. So made to order is just fancy word for a pre-order. Is there a point where an OTT becomes steampunk because of the amount of accessories you add? I mean, steampunk is more of a theming. Like, adding a lot of accessories does not automatically make it steampunk. People have tried to mix steampunk with Lolita to various degrees of success, but yeah, it's steampunk, I think, is more about the kind of accessories you add than, like, the amount. But yeah, OTT, eventually I think there is a certain degree with OTT that you can only go so far, right? Before it becomes uncomfortable to wear. So a lot of it used to be, usually this kind of thing is limited more to, like, special events. Like, people will dress up really nicely for, like, a tea party or something, but casual is more everyday. So another thing, as I mentioned before, because this fashion is so diverse in terms of actual aesthetics, there's a lot of categories of Lolita fashion. So, tech Lolita. I'm sure it exists. I have yet to see somebody do it particularly well, to be honest. But yeah, so you have a lot of substyles that can kind of help to categorize things, I guess, a little. So I think I've talked about some of these earlier, but the most common one, at least in current year, is probably Sweet. So Sweet Lolita is, like, very pastel. It's kind of it's probably the thing people think of when they think of Lolita fashion. Very light, very fluffy, kind of cotton candy vibes. A lot of the popular motifs that you see in this kind of substyle are, like, desserts, clouds, candy, cute animals, hearts, fairy tales, fruit sometimes. Strawberries are very popular. So yeah, this one's, again, this was the one that was most popular in 2011, but continues to be pretty popular. It's kind of the default nowadays, in my experience. But yeah, no, this is the big pastel, big poofy, extra poofy dress, you know, big bows. Color scheme is typically pastels. Sometimes, though, you do get, like, bolder tones, so sometimes you'll get stuff with, like, you know, reds, like bright reds, or, like, bright blues. Angelic Pretty is a brand that is most commonly associated with this look, but they are by far not the only ones doing it. Another common one is Gothic Lolita, which is kind of exactly what it says. Like, I don't know what you expected here. Common motifs, you know, goth stuffs. Tons of chords have a My Mellow bag. Yeah, I don't know. Sanrio was really popular with the Sweet Lolita crowd. Well, Sanrio is popular with every crowd, but, like... so yeah, Gothic, you know, lots of crosses, lots of coffins, moons, lots of churches, skulls, you know, goth stuff. Goth color scheme is typically darker colors. So like either black, kind of this royal blue, reds, purples, white as well. I put that white one in the middle there just to show an example of like this substyle, because not everything is automatically in black. So this is like an example of like this specific substyle in white. But yeah, this one I think compared to Sweet is a little more, I guess kind of not mature. I don't think mature is the word for it, but like it's a little more elegant. It's, yeah, like everyone looks a little sadder. I love the collar on the right. Oh yes, the dress on the right actually. The dress there is called, it's actually, okay, this dress on the right here is actually a really good example of like China's current influence on the fashion. This dress is called Nameless Poem, and it is possibly in the current meta, the current Lolita fashion meta, it is possibly the most popular dress. So many brands have tried to replicate this, but somehow like this dress, it's selling so hard. They keep having to do re-releases for it, and every single time they're like, this is the last one, we swear, and then it's not. Like this like very simple style, like just kind of black dress, big sleeves, big collar, crosses, like it's so iconic, and I feel like it's been like the dress in the past few years for Gothic Lolita. Yeah, that's China's influence. Yeah, again, it's from a brand called Istamori, which is a Chinese brand. And I think this is probably one of the first, or one of the major examples of like a Chinese brand having a dress with like enough hype to rival one of the Japanese brands. There's been a few other ones I think, but like this one I think is the big one. How much money did the model get? Probably gazillion, all for being cute. Not really. I mean, it's still niche. Nobody goes into this fashion to make money. But yeah, got some nun influences. Yeah, kind of crosses and like religious influences, but that's kind of typical of most Gothic fashion, I think. So, is there a market for collection edition releases of Lolita fashion? Sort of, I guess. Like most people who buy these dresses do wear them, but some people do treat it more as like a collecting hobby. Like Pokemon cards, but with clothes. Yeah, some people do want like specific releases of things. To get in to burn money. You're not wrong. There are people I think who do kind of treat it as like a collecting hobby. But yeah, a lot of people do. Most people who buy these things do wear them. I think it's a little, because the thing is like dresses take up a lot of space, right? Compared to like stamps or anime figures or Pokemon cards or something. Like dresses are a very like space occupying collecting hobby. So like if you're gonna buy it and you fit into it, might as well wear it, right? Nun fashion, what would that even look like? Drab brown cloaks. I mean, there's definitely been other dresses released by Gothic brands that definitely have like very nun, like they're very nun influenced. But yeah, that's not atypical. Like that's not unusual for Gothic fashion though. So, yeah, that's Gothic. That's pretty self-explanatory. Yeah. I only get my drip feed of Lolita when there's like another drama explosion online. I mean, it does happen. There is, I don't know. There is drama, but I feel like every fashion community has a lot of drama. I don't think there's a single, like, fashion community that does not occasionally explode. Third one, this is the third most common substyle. It is classic. So, classic is kind of somewhere in the middle between these two. It's a lot more kind of mature than sweet, but it's a lot less gloomy looking than Gothic. It's kind of takes more inspiration from like vintage and retro kind of stuff. So you'll see a lot of like Anne of Green Gables kind of inspiration, or, you know, more direct historical fashion inspiration than other substyles. It's the best one. It is my favorite. It's also my favorite. This is the one I wear the most. Yeah, it's like a modern take on Victorian dress. Yeah. Yeah, as you can see, like, it's a little, I'd say it's a little more toned down. Not toned down, but I find this one is the easiest one to tone down. Like, if you're trying to wear it casually, I find classic is the easiest, just because it's probably the easiest one to fit other things from outside the fashion into. But yeah, common motifs usually you'll find are florals, clocks, musical instruments. Typical color schemes are usually like reds, browns, blues, greens, and a lot of like cream, off-white, ivory, kind of not quite white kind of things. That's probably the shoujo inspiration you were talking about, Anne of Green Gables. That was huge in the late 70s, wasn't it? Yeah. Honestly, I feel like I need to look more into like Anne of Green Gables as it relates to Japan, because Anne of Green Gables was just huge in Japan for some reason. I think there's a lot. Same with, I guess, Heidi Girl, the Alps. I mean, maybe some of it just that they got adapted into anime, but I feel like there's a lot of like Western stories that just really, Japan just like fell in love with them for some reason. Yeah, I love the hats too. So amazingly cute and fresh. Yeah, I mean, any style can have hats. It's just the matter of the examples I used here. But yeah, I guess they are a little more common. But I guess it's also when you're taking from like historical influences, like people in the past wore a lot of hats, and that was normal. Yeah, I wish people in London wore these kinds of clothes. I mean, if you're talking about London, England, I know there definitely are. Any big city at this point probably has at least a small community for it. So here's some less common substyles. These are less common, not because they're less popular, but because a lot of these are so weirdly specific that you can only wear so much of it, right? So like first one here is sailor, which is exactly what it sounds like. Based on sailor uniforms, it's kind of more of a theme than it is an actual substyle. Like you can't make an entire sailor wardrobe. I mean, I guess you could, but like you get tired of it pretty fast. Common colors, sailor colors, like red, white, blue, black, gold. I've seen green a couple times, but it's not super common. The thing with sailor I find is that it works more as a theme than it does as a actual substyle, because like you can have elements of sailor and just put in elements of other substyles. So like you see this example on the left. This one is definitely more of an example of like sweet sailor kind of, because you can see like, big poofy dress, teddy bears at the bottom, you got your like cute little animals, like the way the hair is done. Like this is not trying to replicate an actual sailor uniform. Like this is just kind of, it has a sailor color, it has a nautical theme, but it feels more sweet, right? Whereas the one on the right is probably more classic kind of looking. Like it's taken a little more pointers from like actual naval uniforms. The hat, the simplicity of it, still sailor, kind of different. I have never seen gothic sailor, but I'm sure it exists. Yeah, I like the right one better. There was an anime for it that was out at roughly the same year Gundam era. They got covered in the same magazines a lot of the time. Beret's my beloved. Yes, Beret's good. Beret's good. But yeah, they're both sailor. But yeah, it's kind of definitely more of a theme. Like, I own a lot of sailor stuff, but I would not dare try to make an entire wardrobe out of it. Country Lolita is another one that's gotten a lot more popular recently. I'd say it's another one that's a bit more of a theme than an actual style, because again, you can spin it a few different ways. I guess if you're not well acquainted with it, it's kind of just, this is what the kids these days, what the Zoomers might call cottagecore. It's kind of Lolita mixed with cottagecore. Also so beautiful. Yeah, this one's another one that I tend to wear a lot. Because again, it's another one there's a lot of room, there's a lot of wiggle room. You can spin this a few different ways. So, again, usually you'll see a lot of gingham, you'll see a lot of plants, fruits, flowers. This one here, like top left, is probably an example of what you would call like kind of sweet country. Like, again, the colors are brighter, the vegetables are cartoonier looking. Like there's a lot more bows and ribbons. Like it's a little sweeter. Whereas the two on the right are kind of more classic leaning. They're kind of, this one here, like on the right, is kind of more based on, traditional European clothes. Same with the one at the bottom. It's kind of this softer look. I guess the concept is like, rich girl out in the countryside kind of look, rather. Usually a lot of like Anne of Green Gables or Little House on the Prairie kind of influence as well. Yeah. It's like going through the countryside and seeing these beautiful ladies wearing these like sewing clothes and milking cows. Picnic baskets. Yeah, basket, that's another thing. You see a lot of like basket hats, like wicker basket purses. wonder if there was an era in human history where the common woman wore these kinds of clothes. Not really, but it depends what you mean by the common woman, I think. Again, like I said at the beginning, Lolita fashion is kind of historical fashion from an era that doesn't exist. It blends a lot of eras together. So you have something that looks like it comes from the olden times without really being able to pinpoint it to a specific era, you know? Old school. So old school is, I put it in less common substyles, but it's increasingly common. It's kind of back in vogue. So old school is not a specific style. It's not a single style. Like there's old school versions of different other substyles, right? So you can have like old school gothic or old school sweet. But it's basically just wearing it in a way that emulates the look of like late 90s and early 2000s kind of Lolita. So usually this kind of style, you see a lot more like solids or like very basic prints. So yeah, like basically kind of what I showed you all the way back here. Like back here and here. It's kind of seeking to emulate the vibes of this. And people have put like more modern spins on a lot of like old styles, but again, this is the look they're looking to imitate. There's a bit more flexibility, I think, with quote unquote the rules within this kind of style. Just because, again, if you're emulating Lolita from before the time that it was kind of, the rules were more solid, then yeah, you're probably gonna end up with bending the rules a little. I think also too, like, this one tends to be a little less extreme, I guess. Like, you don't see a lot of, like, OTT old school, just because that look didn't really exist yet. Like, the outfits tend to be very simple, I find, compared to, like, more intricate, more recent outfits. Hime Lolita, I only have one picture, because this is the same one picture that everybody uses when they make a slideshow about this kind of thing. The same Rin Rin doll picture. This one is more heavily Rococo inspired, so like, you know, think like Marie Antoinette, like big everything. It's also not a very common one you see, mainly just because A, it's very expensive, but B, it's also highly impractical. Yeah, Rococo. Yeah, Rococo era. Yeah, it's very expensive to pull off and also highly impractical, so usually people who wear it mainly to like big events. But yeah, so this style you see mostly solid, so you don't see a lot of like printed dresses in this, but there's like a ton of details. So you have like a lot of ruffles, a lot of lace, a lot of big bows, usually a lot of accessories, and big ones too. Like you see like her giant headpiece here. Yeah, just big princess big princess stuff. These ones are also, obviously, for obvious reasons, these substyles are more common in China and Japan. But while Lolita and She Lolita, they take elements of traditional Japanese clothing and traditional Chinese clothing, respectively. I don't actually know. I am not well versed enough in She Lolita to really be able to tell you if this is a good example of it here. It looks okay, but yeah, basically, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's kind of Lolita with those elements mixed in. At least overseas, they're not really recommended for beginners, or at least people without experience in these kinds of styles. Because what tends to happen a lot with people who try this for the first time is if you're not well versed in Lolita and you're also not well versed in like, you know, traditional Japanese or Chinese clothing, then the result is usually just kind of a mess because you're not particularly well versed in either thing. Usually the people who I see doing it successfully are usually the people who wear traditional clothing on a more regular basis. Yeah, it looks more like cosplay. I mean, I think that depends too. There's a whole argument about this with, like, you know, traditional cultural outfits. Like, I think anybody can wear these. It's just that, like, the people who are more intimately familiar with the traditional clothing are just more likely to be able to do it well. And brands will release pieces for this kind of thing. But, you know, it's not just buying the pieces, it's about knowing how to style them, right? Yeah, it's like a great gateway to traditional Japanese and Chinese clothing. Well, actually, it's interesting with Chi Lolita specifically. From what I've heard, the overlap in China between people who wear Lolita and people who wear like hanfu or like, you know, traditional Chinese clothing is very large for whatever reason. Like there's a huge overlap. So it's no surprise that it eventually, like, that crossover did happen. But yeah, yeah, a lot of people, I have looked at a few hanfu pieces and been like, that's actually very cute. I kind of want that. Like when browsing Taobao, like it's happened. I've come close a couple times. But yeah, it's kind of kimono inspired. This one on the left I think is a really good example because I believe this was off someone's Instagram. And I remember she mentioned in the caption that she kind of based it on kind of Taisho era clothing, which I think was, yes, Taisho. It was the one after Meiji. So Taisho was kind of like an era in Japanese history where like international influence was kind of starting to make its way in, and you could see that in a lot of the ways people dressed. So you get kind of like more, you still get some of that, like obviously like the big sleeves, like the kimono sleeves, like it's still very kimono looking, but like there were elements of, you know, more Western looking clothes that were in there as well. But yeah, Taisho era has cool uniforms and hats, that too. But yeah, they should bring it back. Kind of semi-low how denim and shirts won over the world. I mean, I don't know. I don't wear a lot of pants. I don't mind denim, just pants. Ooh. Yeah, Taisho aesthetic is great. Yeah, it's if you're gonna pull from an era, it's a neat era to pull from. Another one is this one, which is possibly the most misunderstood style in the history of this entire fashion. So, Era Lolita, a lot of people hear the name and they're like, sex. And that's not really it. This one is not actually that sexy. It usually leans more gothic, and it's the kind of thing that takes inspiration from a lot of like kind of vintage and historical like lingerie and undergarments. So you'll see a lot of corsets, a lot of hoop skirts, a lot of peignoirs, a lot of, you know, off the shoulder things. It does show a little more skin than your average cord, but not by much. Like you can look at these two here and like you can still see like, yeah, the skirts are a little shorter and like they have their shoulders out, but it's not, you wouldn't say that this is immodest, right? It's kind of, it's more like that. Side note, this outfit on the right is the only thing I ever want to look like. Like, I saw this outfit on, I believe it was from Tokyo Fashion. Yeah, it was Tokyo Fashion, which is like an Instagram account that does street snaps. And I saw this in 2016, and I'm like, this is what I want to become. This is the only thing I want to be. I have yet to actually wear anything like this, but if it was possible, I would. If I could find the exact pieces here, I would definitely wear them. Like, this is all I want to be. Water time, hold on. It's Arrow by Lolita standards. Yeah, I guess a little. Why is my voice going? I'm only like, what, an hour in or something? Well, I guess it's 2 hours in, that's fair. So, oh my god, we're 2 hours in and I only just got to this point. So, I guess next what I'm going to go through is kind of how chords are built. So, like, what is in a full chord here? Now that we kind of know what things look like, how do we actually put them together? So, yeah, so every chord has like not every single piece is going to be in every single chord, but like for the most part, you got to have a blouse, you got to have a main piece, thing on your head, socks or legwear, shoes, bag, accessories, bloomers, and sometimes coats or cardigans. Do you feel kind of embarrassed though wearing these kinds of clothes in public? How do you get over that fear? Experience, I think. I mean, I think the thing is that like when people are staring at you, it's not always a bad thing, right? I think there's a tendency to like mistake a lot of curiosity for malice, and I think that's not really like when people are staring at me, it's like, yes, I'm wearing something unusual. it's normal that people are going to stare a little. Usually I put in my headphones, like, so that people don't try to talk to me, or at least are less inclined to try. It is a little annoying, but again, it's just something you kind of get used to after a while. And it helps too, if you're wearing it for the first time, to be with a group, because, you know, a group is going to attract, like, a group of people in puffy dresses is going to attract a lot of attention, right? But again, no one's looking directly at you, they're looking at the group. So, but again, I feel like I'm also not the kind of person that's ever been self-conscious about these things. And I know things are different everywhere. Like, wearing this in a small town versus wearing it in a big city is obviously going to elicit different responses, you know? So, moving on. So, blouses. Blouses are... I hope everyone here knows what a blouse is. I don't think that's not a mystery. So, blouses, they can be long or short-sleeved. Cool. The collar styles can vary, but they're almost always a high neckline. So, usually... you notice here, like, some of them have more, like, Peter Pan collars. Some of them have, like, more, like, the Victorian-looking high neck. Some of them do go a little lower, but they're not totally off the shoulder, right? Yeah, you should use the opportunity to try to sell them stuff. It's like, what do I have to sell? I'm keeping all my clothes. I'm hoarding all this for myself. So, yeah, blouses can be long or short-sleeved. Some of them have, like, big, wide sleeves. Some of them don't. There's not really a distinct rule of blouses, aside from, like, you know, high neckline, no V-necks, frilly. I think another thing that's been also popular recently is what I can only describe as, like, Lolita crop tops. They've definitely been more popular in China, I think. They're called half blouses, but yeah, they're basically just crop tops. They're usually meant to be worn underneath something else, but they're basically just like a blouse with the bottom half cut off, you know? Like, it's meant for summer, and those have been more popular lately as well. But yeah, Lolita and Lolita accessories. Oh my god, I have no idea where to find them now, but there was a trend of people just photoshopping King of the Hill characters with just, like, OTT Lolita cords. There's a picture somewhere, if anybody can find it, there's a picture somewhere of, like, Hank Hill, or maybe it was Peggy, somebody from King of the Hill just, like, photoshopped with a lot of angelic pretty rings on. How long does it take to wear these kinds of clothes? Like, to put them on? Not that much more time than it takes to put on anything else, I think. Like, I'm not spending a ton of time dressing in the morning. If anything, more of the time is devoted to, you know, hair and makeup. But, yeah. So next thing is main pieces. So there's 3 kinds of main pieces. The first one that you'll probably see the most of is called a JSK. JSK is short for jumper skirt, and it's basically just a dress without sleeves. Some JSKs will be more like a corset style, so some of them don't have straps at all, but most of them will just be like, you know, straps. So usually these will have a blouse worn underneath, or alternatively, sometimes people will wear them on their own with, like, something else on top, like a cardigan or something, but usually it's a blouse. An OP, which is short for one piece, is a dress with sleeves. No blouse is necessary. So some OPs will have long sleeves, some will have short sleeves. The point is that it has sleeves, you don't need to wear anything underneath. A skirt is a skirt. I hope I don't need to explain what that is. There's some dresses, I think, that I have that can qualify as both OPs and JSKs. Like, they have, like, sleeves, but they're, like, really thin sleeves, so it can honestly be worn either way, depending on how you want to style it. But, yeah, these are the kinds that you're going to be finding. Oh, did you find it? Did you find it? Whoa, yeah, there it is. There it is. There it is. The Hank Hill angelic pretty edits. Oh wait, no, hold on. Where's my? There we go, slideshow. There we go. Back to here. He's wearing chest chocolate. Yeah, that's like an angelic pretty dress. Yeah, honestly, as a guy that wears pretty much only jackets, shorts, and jeans, this has been fascinating. Honestly, to be fair, I've always been the kind of person who's been, like, very dedicated to what I wear and like very, not picky, but like very particular about what I wear and how I present myself. So I find it absolutely fascinating that there are people that just wear the same thing over and over. It's not, I don't mean that in a mean way, but it's just like one of those things where it's like, I can't imagine a version of myself that doesn't care about what I wear. Yeah. He's trying his best. It's a good chord. He looks fine. He looks fine. Okay. What's next? Headpieces. Headpieces are pieces that go on your head. So every chord needs one, but it doesn't have to be anything extreme. So, the most common ones are usually like berets or hats, or head bows. So head bows are headbands with a bow on it. Pretty self-explanatory. But yeah, hats, headbands, big hair clips or ribbons or head bows. You also have these here at the bottom right. These are called rectangle headdresses. They were a lot more popular in the olden days, but like they never really went away. They never really died. You'll still see them occasionally. It's just basically like a strip of lace that you usually tie up at the chin. But yes, berets are my favorite. I wear berets with literally every outfit. Berets make everything better. But yeah, basically put something on your head. Just put even like a large hair clip can work. It's to help with this, like I mentioned earlier, it's to help with the silhouette balance. So like, you know, if you want, you know, your skirt is big, you want to balance it out. So you put a lot of stuff on the top half to kind of balance it out. So I find that when you put together a cord but don't have a headpiece, it might not look bad, but it's always going to feel like something's missing, you know? Just something's not quite right. Wigs are an option, but they are not mandatory, and I will talk more about them later. Next is socks, legwear, tights. Pretty self-explanatory. There's not a lot to this. Right, it's like a two-who rules. Yeah, I guess... I don't know, do Toho characters wear big bows? I guess a lot of them do have big bows, don't they? But yeah, drills are nice, but again, not necessary. A lot of headpieces, like a lot of brands when they're like advertising their headpieces or making stock photos for their website, usually they'll almost always put like big drill wigs on the mannequins, but like again, that's not the default hairstyle, I don't think. But yeah, socks, legwear, self-explanatory. You can have tights, you can have knee socks or thigh highs. Some of them have prints or designs. They don't have to. Plain tights are fine. If it's like if putting on printed tights or socks makes your design, like makes your cord too busy looking, you don't have to. Sometimes brands will release matching tights or socks for specific dresses or sets. That's pretty common. In the winter, you can wear full tights. In the summer, you can wear ankle socks. There's not a lot to this, to be honest. Shoes. Oh goodness, it's raining quite hard outside. Okay. The stuff has to be hard to draw. Oh yeah. There's a reason why every time Lolita fashion pops up in anime, everyone is wearing entirely solids. Nobody ever wears prints in anime because the animators look at dresses, presumably, and they're like, yeah, we're not animating that. But yeah, thigh-high socks is hard to pull off. You need to have a nice physique to make it cute. Not inherently, I think. I think part of it, too, is, because of the length of the dresses, usually when you wear the socks, the top of the sock reaches roughly where the skirt falls. Like, the top of the sock reaches the end of the skirt. So, I find it doesn't actually matter, I think. Usually a lot of my thigh highs tend to fall down to my knees anyway, but, like, yeah. Except CCS. Cardcaptor Sakura. But yeah, no, I don't think you need a specific body type to make, like, printed over the knees work. Cardcaptor Sakura? I feel like I'm behind. I'm behind on this. So shoes, I think a lot of people have like a very narrow image of what Lolita shoes look like, but there's actually a bigger variety that you can put in than you think. It's really just about how you style it. So these here, like the pink ones right here, these are called tea parties. I believe they were originally designed by Angelic Pretty, but citation needed, I'm not 100% sure on that one. But they've kind of become like the default shoe for a lot of people, and they're very common, and they work for most substyles, but they're definitely not the only kind of shoe that work. So one thing you see with a lot of shoes is that they're very strappy, if that makes sense. You see a lot of straps, a lot of buckles. Like you look at the Tea Parties here, or even the black ones, kind of center bottom. They're full of bows. They're very strappy. They're kind of large. Like they kind of still have that like early 2000s big shoe influence. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it was AP design, but there were lots of knockoffs. I mean, to be fair, you can't copyright a shoe design, I don't think. So like there's always going to be a ton of knockoffs for everything. And to be honest, I think for shoes specifically, there should be a lot of knockoffs because some brands just don't make a lot of sizes. And I'm going to be honest, the shoe quality from the major Lolita brands leaves a bit to be desired. So it's probably for the best that some of these designs, it sounds really bad, but it's probably for the best that some of these designs get knocked off just a little bit so that we can get like just a modicum of quality, just a little more quality. Are they comfortable? Depends where you buy them from. I think it depends on what your definition of comfort is. I would say they're definitely like, they're not as comfortable as sneakers, but you know, the flats are about as comfortable as your average, you know, ballet flats kind of thing. Like you can have flat Tea Parties or high-heeled Tea Parties. They're both pretty comfortable. It's really more about like, how does the shoe fit? Like usually when I've had Lolita shoes that were really like unwearably uncomfortable, it's usually just because I bought the wrong size. Actually, I'm pretty sure the shoes, the black Tea Parties that I use as an example here, are from a brand. It's a Chinese brand called Sosik Shop, and highly recommend. I haven't ordered from them in a few years, but like their shoes are very good price. Like they're pretty cheap, and they are actually quite comfortable. Like there is a surprising, for the price, there's like a surprising amount of cushioning inside. Highly recommend. I think they do custom sizing too, if I remember correctly. So like if you have unusually large or small feet, I believe they can accommodate that. But yeah, laces are a bit more messy. Oh, Eggy, so you've done ballet before? No, I meant ballet flats, like flats, like not ballet slippers. So yeah, no. But a lot of the other things you see are Mary Jane's, big platforms. So like the Demonia platforms here, I actually own this pair. I believe the style is called Kara. This kind of thing has been more popular. Again, kind of that old school, like big shoe influence. You'll get boots sometimes. Those are more common in the winter. Rocking horse shoes, which are the things in the bottom left here. So rocking horse shoes were actually a thing that came in more from like punk, because these were originally they were a Vivienne Westwood design that just somehow got co-opted by Lolitas, and everyone just loved them and wore them with everything. They're kind of a staple of old school, like early 2000s. Most of the people who own them do not own like a genuine Vivienne Westwood pair. Like obviously this is another design that's been knocked off a lot. If you have an actual Vivienne Westwood pair, then you are a god among men, and I respect you. But yeah, basically the point with shoes is just to not be basic. Just don't be basic. If you have this big elaborate outfit and then you wear it with just like, you know, a plain pair of flats, that's not gonna work, right? Like, make sure the shoes that you're wearing just kind of fit the vibe of the rest of the outfit. I think too, it also depends on the occasion. Like, I think that if you're at like a convention, for example, and you're walking around, you're on your feet the whole day, don't worry about your shoes matching everything else. I think like most people will understand. But you know, if you're going to like a short tea party, then you know, wear nice shoes, you know? I think as well, there have been people, especially for Sweet, who have tried to integrate sneakers into it as well, and it can work in some circumstances, but you really gotta know what you're doing. Like, it can either look really cute or it can look like you're not trying. But it is, what I'm saying is that it's possible. It's not recommended, but it's possible. Bags and accessories. Honestly, go wild. This is definitely a thing where you can integrate basically anything. Yeah. Maybe on Gothic or Punk Lolita. Maybe not Punk. Usually when I see it, it's sweet. So, like, usually I've seen, like, people integrating, like, pastel Converse into, like, pastel chords. But again, it only works... You can't do, like, an OTT pastel thing and just have, like, regular Converse. I know those... there was a brand... what's it called? Like, Yuru. They did these really thick platform sneakers that were very popular a few years back. Because they did a lot of, like, big pastel things. But yeah, no, bags, accessories, just go wild. Don't be limited to just Lolita brands. Most of my accessories that I wear with Lolita are from, like, other brands, or, like, you know, I've worn, like, Kate Spade jewelry with cords before. Like, it doesn't have to be Lolita exactly. Although there are a few kinds of things that you're only going to find from Lolita brands, probably. So an example is wrist cuffs. Wrist cuffs are a very popular accessory that are usually just like a thing of lace that you have around your wrist. Very popular. Another thing that you'll find mostly only in Lolita is plushie bags, which are kind of exactly what they sound like. The example I use there, the bear there, that is Kuma Kumya. So that brand, Baby the Stars Shine Bright, they have two mascots called, well, technically three I think now, but they have Usa Kumya, which is a rabbit that looks, or no, it's a bear that looks, no, it's either a rabbit that looks like a bear or a bear that looks like a rabbit, but it's Usa Kumya. And then there's Kuma Kumya, who is a bear that looks like a bear. I think in more recent years they've also had Neko Kumya, which is a cat. But yeah, they make plushie bags of all of their mascots. I want one someday. I keep telling myself that I'm gonna buy a Kumya in Japan. I want to go to Japan. And I don't care if it's firsthand from the store or if it's secondhand. I want to go into a store and walk out there with a Kumya in my hands. The Kumya will be mine, but only if I buy it in person. I feel like if I buy it online, it's not gonna be as special. But yeah, it's a bear that looks like a bear. It's Kumya. But yeah, these are, I believe Angelic Pretty also has their own mascot that they make plushie bags of, as with other brands. It's a popular thing. The only thing with plushie bags is that they can barely hold anything. Like, they will hold, like, your debit card and your ID and maybe a tube of lipstick and maybe your phone if you're lucky. Like, they're very small bags. They're not very practical. Extremely cute, not at all practical. Make your own eggy mascot bag. I mean, I don't know what an eggplant bag would look like, to be honest. But yeah, no, bags, heart-shaped purses are common. You have more regular-looking handbags. Again, accessories, go wild. If your phone is small. If your phone is small, then maybe it will fit inside a Kumya bag. Maybe, if you're lucky. You might have to, like, tilt it a certain way or something. My point is that they're very small and not very practical. Bloomers. Bloomers are kind of optional. I mean, basically the point of bloomers is so that people don't look at your butt. Like, if you're going up an escalator or something, people aren't going to see up your skirt and they're not going to look at your butt. It's not super imperative that you have actual bloomers. Like, you can use regular, like, bike shorts or, like, safety shorts or whatever you want to call them. You can use regular ones. But, you know, bloomers is fun because it's, like, poofy and you have your big bloomers. Another thing that's notable, especially with, like, more old school styles, is something called peaking bloomers, which is where you wear bloomers that are just, like, a little longer than your skirt so that it kind of peeks out at the knees. That's common. That's cute. I like that. But yeah, no, it's not... If you're trying to make a shopping list, this should not be the top of your priority list. This is not of peak importance. Next is coats and cardigans and capes. Layering is honestly a big part of this fashion. Like I mentioned earlier, usually people wear, like, dresses on top of blouses and stuff. So coats and cardigans are just another part of that for colder weather. So keep in mind, for those who live in cold places, so, like, you know, Canada or northern US or one of the colder countries in Europe, the coats are made more for Japanese winters, or Chinese winters, I guess, if you order from China. They're definitely not made for North American winters. So just keep that in mind. don't try to use one of these as your regular winter coat. It will not work. The main thing with coats is that you don't have to have them from like an actual Lolita brand, but the main issue is just to make sure it doesn't crush the petty. So like, if you look at most of these coats and cardigans and capes, you'll notice that either they have like a loose bottom, like with the capes. The bottom might flare out at the waist and stop there, or it might cut off at the waist, or it might, you know, have its own like big poof shape to it. This is just so it doesn't crush, you know, so that you don't lose the poof. You gotta keep your shape, you know? That's what it's for. Hair and makeup, there's not really a distinct style. I talked about this a little bit earlier when I was talking about kind of the history of the style. There's not a distinct Lolita makeup look. It's kind of evolved over time, and it's always been heavily based in whatever else happens to be in style at the time. So there's not a distinct look the same way that there is for like Yaru or Visual Kei. Like, there's nothing like that. I'd say at the moment, makeup does tend to trend a little lighter, like on the lighter side, but it doesn't have to. Like, people do all sorts of makeup with Lolita. A lot of people just do their regular makeup, and then they put on a frilly dress, and that's it. Like, it doesn't have to be super fancy. As for hair, many hairstyles involve bangs, but that's not the it's kind of the default, but not all of them do. It's perfectly possible to do this fashion without bangs. If you want an example, I think she got bangs eventually, but if you scroll far enough down her Instagram, there's search Fanny Rosie on Instagram. She has bangs now, but if you scroll far enough down, you can find her before she got her haircut. But I would say a lot of her outfits are like a good example of how to do things nicely, but without bangs. Or at least kind of like, when she did have bangs, it was kind of like sideswept kind of thing. Of course, her style's a little more like vintage inspired. So obviously what she does might not work for everybody, but I feel like it's a good example. As for wigs, wigs are optional. Wigs are entirely optional. But I will say, if you do wear a wig, try to use one with like a more natural texture to the hair. So a lot of new people might try to use cosplay wigs, and cosplay wigs don't really work for this because they're always going to look like cosplay wigs. Because sometimes sometimes you have wigs that were designed for a specific character, right? So you're gonna look at this wig and you're like, okay, that is definitely Toga, My Hero Academia. That is her hair. That is her hair. You can try to hide it, but that is her hair. But the other thing, too, is that cosplay wigs typically don't have the most natural texture to them. Like, usually you can see this a lot with, like, especially more, like, colorful ones. Because usually what cosplayers look for in wigs is the ability to style them, right? Because you're trying to style it to look like a specific character, right? So it needs to look good when the bangs are cut. It needs to be, you know, easy to wash. You need to be able to straighten it without it melting. You need to be able to, you know, place the hair. It needs to have some kind of roughness to it so that you can tease it and do whatever you need to do with it. Make your giant anime boy spikes. Whereas, you know, Lolita wigs, it's more trying to emulate natural hair. So the texture will be a little different. The other thing with a lot of Lolita wigs is that they also technically have like kind of an ombre kind of look to them. It's like how real hair, like your real hair probably isn't all one color, right? Like most people have kind of one main color with flecks of another color, right? Whereas a lot of cosplay wigs, because they're trying to imitate fictional characters, they will just have like one straight color. So yeah, this wig, I believe, the example here is from a Chinese brand called Dreamholic. I'd say they're probably the most popular Lolita wig company at the moment. They're good. I highly recommend, actually. I have a Dreamholic wig. It's my favorite wig. It's nice. It's a long blonde one. It's easy to brush. The texture feels nice. It's comfortable to wear. Dreamholic, sponsor me. Yeah. Yeah, there were two-toned wigs that were the rage for all a while. Oh yeah, the two-toned wigs. That was another thing in like early 2010s, was like these like split color wigs. So like you'd have a wig and like one side would be of the wig would be white and the other side would be pink. Or like one side would be, you know, one color and the other side would be another color. Those are very popular. They kind of fell out of fashion pretty fast, I think. Yeah, like that was definitely a thing. But yeah, wigs are hit or miss. Yeah, I mean, again, if you're looking for wigs, look for fashion ones specifically rather than cosplay ones. I guess that's the main thing. I can attest I thought it was your real hair at first. Yeah, Bodega was there when I wore my Dreamholic wig at Anime North, and she can attest she thought it was real hair. Like it is an impressive wig. It is a nice wig. But yeah, they were very much the trend at the time. I'm imagining the like onion on the belt. It's like I wore a split color wig, which was the fashion at the time. So yeah, that's hair and makeup. There aren't really any specific rules about it, but just like, I don't know, look cleaned up. So next part, how to acquire clothes. So you might be asking, okay, this is cool. How do I get any of this? Can't wait for a wardrobe stream. Honestly, I want to do that. I want to do that. Just the like POV, you ask me where I bought my clothes, and I will tell you the story of how I got every single one of these dresses that I own. So, yes. Why? I did not give... Okay, evidently you can see... Evidently I missed a spot when I was preparing the slideshow. I used a template, I'll admit. I used like a slideshow template. I can enter a subtitle here if I need it. You know, and I guess it turns out I did not need it. I did not need to enter a subtitle. I don't know, usually for most of these, if you don't get rid of the subtitle, then it just, like, it automatically hides it. I didn't think it would show. I didn't think that was supposed to show. Okay, so the first way to acquire things is to know where not to acquire things. So, places I do not recommend buying Lolita clothes from include Amazon, eBay, AliExpress, YesStyle. So those are like, you know, big online clothing retailers. I would not recommend trying to buy it there. Milano or Milanu, that was an infamous scam site from back in the day that also had a bajillion other URLs. Basically what they would do is that they would steal stock photos from either big brands or from... They stole a lot of like Taobao stock photos as well, and then they would send you a piece of actual garbage. So people who didn't know better would order from there and receive something that is useless in just every capacity. Have you ever heard about Haffa? This is definitely a D's Nuts joke, and I'm not going to fall into that trap. I hope you have a nice day. Oh, it's a wholesome D's Nuts joke. Thank you. But yes, the YesStyle roulette. But yeah. Milano, yeah, avoid it. There's also, I think somebody made like a master list. I don't know where it is. Somebody once made a master list because Milano also had like a bajillion other names. So somebody made like a master list of all of them. So just avoid all of them. Additionally, I would say have a very high distrust of any site that is retailing this specific dress that is not And Romeo. So this dress, this extremely notorious dress, the original was made by a small Japanese brand called And Romeo. I don't think it's even listed on And Romeo's site anymore. I don't think they still sell it. Because this piece has got to be at least a good decade old. What if I ask about Candace? This is a D's Nuts joke. I am familiar. I am well versed in D's Nuts jokes. Can this girl be any cuter? A subversion. But yeah, Milano, we got a video essay on their escapades. No, but I'm sure someone has made that. Oh, thank you, Magnologia. Thank you for sprouting. But yeah, the notorious dress. Convicted on 3 counts of wire fraud. To be honest, probably. This dress, well, okay, this dress actually is not responsible for any crimes. If anything, it's like it was complicit in crimes, but it's not responsible for any of them. So basically, this dress was originally made by a small Japanese brand called Anne Romeo. And then every other site on the internet proceeded to take the design and absolutely steal it. So you'll see this dress sometimes listed on Amazon or eBay or other like random sketchy websites. And I think I can see why this design was stolen, because like it's not a bad design, but it looks like it would be easy to replicate, but it's actually difficult to replicate, and all the replicas of it are terrible quality. So yeah, if this dress is listed on any of those sites, if you see any site where this is listed that isn't Anne Romeo, just don't buy from there, don't trust them. They are almost definitely lying about this. I remember there was one YouTuber named Lovely Lore. She did a video where she just ordered this dress. Like, she found several websites where this dress was listed, and she ordered a whole bunch of them. And they were all of vastly varying degrees of quality and sizing. And it was one of those things where she was like, I can't even recommend any of these because I can't guarantee that if you ordered any of them, you would even get the same thing that I did. Like, there really is just the friggin' Anne Romeo dress replica industry out here. But yes. How to do Lolita fashion? The same way everybody else does. Might have to take into account sizing, but, you know, the principles of fashion are the same. But yes, chat cute. Okay, so, now that we know where not to buy it, okay, the other thing too with other sites, like Amazon, eBay, AliExpress, YesStyle, even if you do find good things on there, they are absolutely going to be overpriced. I know some people seem to be convinced that Amazon is the cheapest option for everything, but I promise you, when it comes to this, it's not. There are better options. Anything good you might get there, you're probably going to be paying way more for it than you need to. Yeah, there's also OG. Yeah, I'll get into that later. Is OG a Lolita style? Sort of, but also not. I'm not really an expert on it, but again, I have a slide on this later. So, first way to acquire it reliably is firsthand in person. This is probably the one that people are least likely to do. But, you know, most major brands have physical stores, sort of, for the time being. More and more of them have been closing their physical stores due to, you know, pandemic and economic reasons, but, you know, some of them still do. Brands also will commonly be at conventions as guests as well. That's a thing that happens, and usually when they're guesting at a convention, they will sell their stuff, so you can buy some stuff there. I've gotten a few dresses like that. So this picture is actually of Angelic Pretty. This is their Paris location. Angelic Pretty have mostly stores in Japan. They have a few places in Japan, but they also have some abroad. So you have, I believe they have a location in San Francisco, and they have a location in Paris. Baby the Stars Shine Bright also has a location in San Francisco, I think. They used to have one in New York, and then it closed in like 2016, 2017? But yeah, there's a fashion show at AX. Yep. Usually big brands are more likely to come to big conventions, but you know, sometimes smaller ones will get them. It's all about how good the organizers are. Yeah, rest in peace BTSSB New York. I never actually got to go to it. So, your other option, if you don't go to conventions and you don't live near one of these, is to buy it firsthand online. So usually most brands have online shops. Most of them I think you can access from overseas, but some of them you will need a proxy to buy them from outside Japan. There are different proxies, like you can use other proxy services, but I know there's also like J-Fashion specific proxies from within Japan that just like specialize in this kind of service. So yeah, you still can. Obviously, Taobao, that's another one. If you're buying off Taobao, there's a lot of great Taobao brands. They're usually on average a lot cheaper, and they have a lot of variety, but also if you're buying off Taobao, you're going to need a proxy service, which, again, there's like a bajillion of those because so many people are buying so many things off Taobao. So if you just Google like Taobao proxy service or like Taobao shopping service, you'll find like a bajillion results, and then you can just use whichever one has, you know, the best service or the best prices or whatever. Taobao resellers also exist, but they tend to sell at a very large markup, so I don't recommend it unless you're trying to find something that's like completely out of stock on Taobao. Again, it's just, it's more accessible. I think these kinds of sites do have a lot of value in terms of kind of curation, because sometimes it can help to be able to like more easily find what you're looking for and not have to like sift through things in Chinese, but it really is just kind of, you know, it's more expensive. There's no point in actually buying anything. Now no Taobao reseller will ever sponsor me. It's very sad. But yeah, it's true. A lot of them are a bit more expensive. It's not always the best bang for your buck. So the second, or I guess the third method of buying this is secondhand. So this is how most Lolitas get most of their wardrobe, because this stuff is expensive and nobody is out here buying everything straight from the brand. Because the other thing too is a lot of clothes, a lot of specific pieces are done in limited releases, right? So you might do just pre-orders and then that's it. Sometimes certain popular prints or popular pieces will get like a re-release, but you know, once something ends its run, it's kind of just gone. And if you want it, then you have to buy it secondhand. Did I get disconnected from my own chat? What is going on? Okay, so yeah, this is usually how most people get most of their clothes. Either for, you know, budget reasons or just for like, you know, you wanted a piece that was sold out 3 years ago. So I recommend going to swap meets if you can. A lot of local communities will run swap meets where you can like buy and sell clothes. You can like, you know, touch the dress in person. You can see it with your own eyes. You can hold it up against your body to try to figure out if it's going to fit. Highly recommend if you can make it to one. As for online options, Lace Market is kind of probably the biggest like international secondhand sales platform for Lolita fashion. Yeah, you can filter it too. I'd say their search system is very good. You can filter things by like what country it's shipping from, or you can filter it by like sub-style or type of item. Like it's very good. There's also, for secondhand, you also have Closet Child, Wonder Welt, and Tokyo Alice. I've never used Tokyo Alice. I know some people have had like various issues with it from what I've heard, but again, I have no first-hand experience. But these are all Japanese, or at least secondhand Lolita fashion retailers based in Japan. So Closet Child is the one I use the most. Closet Child is Closet Child my beloved. Closet Child is also good for a lot of other J fashions. They carry a lot of stuff. They accept a lot of stuff. But yeah, usually you can go to these and find a fair amount of clothes. Find things secondhand. Back in my day, we used LiveJournal and we liked it. We hated it. I was not around for the LiveJournal era. I'm not old enough for that, but I can imagine it was probably not very good. Also, if you're adventurous, you can try using Japanese auction sites like Frill or Mercari, or Chinese auction sites like Shanyu. I've used Frill before, I believe. I have not tried Shanyu, although I know some people who have. For some of these, you'll need proxy services. For other ones, you won't. I can't remember which ones do and which ones don't need it. But it's another place to get good deals. Because again, this is Japanese auction sites, so you know, it's secondhand. People are selling their stuff secondhand. The only word of warning, I think, is if you're using a proxy service, some sellers on Frill and Mercari won't sell to proxy services, which is understandable because, like, you know, if you're selling something to someone, you want to know who it's going to. But if you're using a proxy service, then it just says it's going to the proxy service, right? So the seller doesn't actually know who's buying their stuff. So I can understand why some people wouldn't want to sell to proxy services, but it's just something to keep in mind. It's not like, you know, sometimes for some people it's like, okay, if it's sold, it's sold, but other people are a little more, which is understandable. A brief word on replicas. They're not very highly regarded. So, because this is a niche fashion that is very expensive, there is a tendency for replicas of popular pieces and popular items to pop up. These are highly frowned upon, to be honest. Partly because a lot of the replicas tend to be of, noticeably lower quality, but also just because, like, even the bigger Japanese brands are not that big. So it's kind of just the politeness of, like, not stealing from small artists kind of thing. Even the bigger brands are, a small fish in the big fashion pond. So you kind of want them to stay afloat. The fish metaphor no longer works. Fish should not float unless they're dead. But, like, they should be alive. That's my point. Usually for design replicas, because there's two kinds of replicas, right? You have, like, print replicas, which is, like, what you see in the picture here. Like, the two dresses, the print has been replicated. But you also have, like, design replicas, which is, like, the general shape of something has been replicated. Design replicas are kind of debatable. Usually print replicas are almost universally just hated. Design replicas are kind of in a gray zone because they're not illegal. Like, the designs of clothing are not actually... You can't patent them and you can't trademark them either because of the way, like, laws around this work. Basically, the short version is that you can't patent the design of a piece of clothing because then everybody, like, imagine if somebody tried to patent the concept of socks and then they became the only person who could sell socks, and now we got a sock monopoly. So because of that, like, because clothing serves a practical purpose, you can't... It's fair game. Like, ethically it might be debatable, but it's fair game to... Legally, it's fair game to, like, copy a design. Yeah, sockopoly, yeah. So, because of this, design replicas are kind of in a bit of a gray zone. You see a lot of, Tea Party shoe replicas. You see a lot of, like, heart purse replicas. And usually those are kind of considered okay. Especially for shoes, because a lot of the times with shoes, like, the sizing for regular brands doesn't go that big. So sometimes if you have big feet, you have no choice but to buy, like, a pair of replica shoes, right? Same with purses. Like, purses of a more generic shape, unless they're definitely, like, trying to replicate a specific purse. Like, I know Angelic Pretty has a few bags that have been replicated so much that, like, a lot of people when looking at the bags just assume they're looking at a replica. But, like, stuff like heart-shaped bags or more, like, generic designs, usually those are fine. The only thing with replicas as well is that if you buy one, it's kind of hard to get rid of because most secondhand sites don't allow replicas. Like, you can't sell them on Lace Market. Even if you state that it's a replica, they don't allow them. I know some people, what they'll do with replicas, if they have, like, a replica that they can't get rid of, they'll use the fabric for something else. So I remember around the time the pandemic started, some people who had replicas of, like, popular prints, they would cut up the dresses and use the fabric to make masks. So now you have, like, a cool matching mask for your popular print dress. So it's stuff like this. I've seen people do, like, accessories or make, like, cushions or something out of replica material. Like, if you don't want to waste it, but you can't actually use it for anything. So yeah, just, like, avoid buying them if at all possible. So now I'm going to move into basic garment care. This is new. I did not have this in my slideshow last time, but yeah, this is just also important to know. Do Lolita brands ever do pop-up store kind of stuff? Yes, sometimes, but I usually just within Japan or within China as well. I don't think it's very common, and usually when they do pop-up stores, it's for, like, it's not all their stuff. It's usually like, oh yeah, we released, like, this print, or we released, like, we had a collaboration with, like, this property. Yeah, it's not super common either, I don't think. But, it's not like it's not like it never happened. So yeah, basic garment care, because sometimes, like, Lolita dresses are maybe not delicate, not all of them are delicate, but, like, they have a few special needs, if that makes sense. So some of this is just basic laundry knowledge, and again, disclaimer, this is stuff that has worked for me. It's not going to work for every single dress, but, you learn through experience. So the first thing to do is to check the labels. A lot of the labels will be written in Chinese or in Japanese, but you can probably look up online if you know how to do some Googling. You can figure out what the Japanese words for, cotton or like what the materials are, right? Hi Eggy. Good evening, Jimmy. I am talking about Lolita fashion. So yeah, yeah, you can definitely like look up, as well as too, is like what Japanese laundry symbols mean. You know how you have like those symbols on the labels. You can look that up too. Know your materials and colors. So synthetic fibers like polyester tend to hold color better than natural ones. So if you're worried about your colors running, you're probably not going to have to worry if it's a polyester dress. It's very unlikely that they're going to run with that. If it's made out of cotton or wool or some other natural fiber, those tend to not hold their dye as well. So you might need to be a bit more careful with those. As well, the darker the color, the more likely it is to run. So like really dark colors or really bold colors are more likely to leak or run than, pastels. So like if you have a dress with like, lots of dark reds or black or like dark blue, like really saturated colors, you got to be careful with those. Some dresses will say dry clean only. This is a lie. It's technically the truth, but this is a lie. You don't always need to dry clean everything. You can if you want, but a lot of dry cleaners as well, depending on the dress, will sometimes just not touch it. I remember there was one dress I tried to take to a dry cleaner once, and they looked at the lace for like 3 seconds, and they're like, nope, not touching this, not touching this. That is way too delicate. We don't want to ruin it. So you don't have to dry clean only for everything if it's not necessary. And if you're in doubt, if it's the first time you're washing a dress, I would say do a hand wash. Don't throw it in the washing machine. But I feel like that's kind of a good rule for a lot of types of clothes. Like, if in doubt, hand wash. The other thing with this is this is going to sound kind of gross and very counterintuitive, but you don't need to be washing your clothes constantly. You don't need to do a full wash every single time. Obviously, if it's dirty, wash it. If you spill something on it, spot clean. Like, if it's smelly, wash it. But you don't need to wash everything every single time. So obviously, like, if you're selling a garment, please wash it before you send it off. If you're like, yeah, basically use common sense, but also you don't need to do it every time. So personally, this is kind of the guideline that I follow for washing. So socks and tights, wash them every single wear. Because these are the things that are closest to the smelliest parts of your body. Every time. Blouses every 1 to 2 wears. I'm not a very sweaty person, so if it wasn't particularly hot out that day or I wasn't running around a lot, sometimes you can get away with, not washing blouses every single time. Most of my blouses are able to go in the machine, but your mileage may vary on that. Skirts and dresses, usually every 2 to 3 wears. Usually skirts and dresses are the ones that are most likely to get damaged in the wash, so it's kind of the one you need to be the most careful with. But again, it depends. OPs, like the ones with sleeves, you're probably going to need to wash more often than JSKs, just because OPs, like, you're sweating directly on it with your armpit. So JSKs, because they're sleeveless, and because you have kind of that buffer of the blouse, you might not need to wash them quite as often. Cardigans and sweaters, I also do like every 2 to 3 wears. Again, it's just like regular cardigans and sweaters. Like, you probably don't need to do a wash every single time you wear it, right? The petticoat is kind of only wash it when it gets smelly. Don't wash it too often, because that will tend to kind of make it dye faster. That will make it tend to kind of, unpuff. It will unpuff a little faster. But again, the petticoat as well is kind of the thing that needs to be washed the least, because it's not directly touching your skin, like, right? Because if you have all the pieces of your cord, it's not touching the outside, because that's what your dress is for. And it's also not touching your skin directly, because that's what your bloomers are for. So you probably don't need to wash it that often. Accessories can also be washed as needed. Every once in a while, if you got like a lace headdress or, bows, you can wash those, hand wash them probably, but, as needed. So when it comes to the actual washing, for the love of God, use cold water. There is basically no reason. Like, I mean, again, this is what I've been taught for laundry in general, is like, unless you're trying to do stain removal or unless you're trying to like disinfect something, don't do things with hot water because it's just gonna make everything worse. Use cold water, like as much as possible, or at least lukewarm. Make sure all the detachable parts are detached. So if there's a lot of dresses will have like clip-on bows. If there's any of those, make sure they're detached. If you're putting it in the washing machine, and you're worried that there's like lace or like something that's gonna snag, just put it in a bag, put it in like a laundry bag. Usually this is how I wash most of my dresses. Put it in a bag and then put it in the washing machine. And usually things turn out just fine. If in doubt, hand wash. Like if you have any concerns at all, don't put it in the washing machine. Just hand wash it. If you have a dress with, especially dresses with thick lace, straighten out the lace while it's wet. Don't put dresses in the dryer, ever. Just don't. Usually you gotta hang them to dry, or, some people say don't put them out in the sun. I don't think it's the worst thing. It might fade the print a bit, but, if it's the only place you got to dry your clothes, then it's fine. But yeah, air dry. But yeah, straighten out the lace while it's wet. Especially if it's like thick lace, like crocheted lace or something like chunky. Yeah, do that. As well, my secret trick as well for petticoats, as demonstrated in this image here, is when you dry petticoats, what I do is I open an umbrella and then I put the petticoat on top of the umbrella. Like I open it up and put it on top of the umbrella. Then I spray it with cornstarch and then let it dry like that. So that's my personal petticoat hack. Your mileage may vary, but that's usually how I do things. As well as storage. For storing clothes, lots of love and care put into the clothes. Well, I mean, they're expensive and they're delicate, so you want to take care of them, right? And I think that's something that, like, a lot of people are aware of, because, like I said, most people buy most of their stuff secondhand, right? So, because of that, you want to be able to make sure that it's going to be in a sellable condition, right? And even then, like, I feel like with a lot of these clothes, I feel like people would rather die than throw away a garment that's still even slightly wearable. Like, I've seen things before where, like, a part of a dress will get damaged, so somebody will just take a different part of the dress and make it into something different. Like, I remember there was somebody I saw on Instagram who had bought this dress online, and it had, like, a lot of undisclosed damage, especially, but it was all the damage was on the bottom half. Like, there were just, like, moths has eaten through the skirt of this dress. So basically what they did is they cut off the skirt half and they just kept wearing the top half of the dress as, like, because it was a long sleeve dress. So they kept the top half and they wore it as, like, a sweater. And people kept asking, where did you get your sweater? And they had to say that actually it's a dress. Yeah, like Marge Simpson, I guess. But yeah, basically, like, you want to make things last a long time. That's the other thing too, because everything is a limited release, right? So if you want somebody in the future to be able to own this item, you better take care of it now, But yeah, so more tips for storage. Don't hang petticoats, put them in a drawer. It sounds very counterintuitive because you're thinking probably, wouldn't putting this puffy thing in a drawer squish it down? And the answer is no, because the ultimate enemy of petticoats is not scrunching. The ultimate enemy of petticoats is gravity. So if you hang it, they're going to kind of deflate. They're going to depoof a lot faster than if you shove them in a drawer. I know when I travel as well, I try to shove them in a bag. I know some people use some of those, like, airtight bags so that they take up less space in a suitcase. But yeah, basically keep them in a drawer, or, like, don't hang them on a hanger. For JSKs, or another thing you gotta be careful of is for, I always hung my petticoat upside down. I guess that's also an option too. I'm trying to imagine how that would be done though. Personally, what I do for my petticoat is I have one of those, like, hanging organizers, and there's a hole that's just, like, perfectly petticoat size, and I just shove my petticoats in there. So it's not quite in a drawer, but, like, it's not hanging directly. Gravity, it's not going to get hurt by gravity. Be careful with hanging bottom-heavy JSKs. So you'll see a lot of JSKs, like the ones without sleeves, that will have these very thin straps. But then, because the dress is so puffy, it will be very bottom-heavy. So what I do for that is I'll hang it, and then I will pass the bottom of the dress through, because you know how hangers will usually have a hole in the middle? So you hang it, and then you pass the rest of the dress through, so it's kind of... It takes up a little more space in the closet, but it'll stop the straps from getting too stretched out. As well, iron or steam your dresses if they're prone to wrinkling. Some dresses aren't. A lot of more recent releases have much like flowier fabrics. But you do still get some like more like stiffer fabrics, or a lot of older dresses I find are made of stiffer fabrics. So yeah, if they're prone to wrinkling, iron or steam them. This is definitely a thing that I totally neglect. I totally iron my dresses. I totally have. My dresses have never been wrinkled, definitely. So I think that brings us to the end of this. And oh my god, the subtitle is still there. I thought it was going to disappear. So this is the final portion of this. And this is the other thing that wasn't in the last one. But it is something that is kind of important to me, I guess. It's just kind of how to integrate Lolita into your everyday style. So I know how a lot of people tend to wear their Lolita is that they have their Lolita pieces, and then they have their regular pieces, and they wear their Lolita pieces to Lolita events, and then they wear their regular clothes the rest of the time. And, like, I can understand that, especially if you have, like, a job that doesn't really, like, a job with a strict dress code, or a job with, you know, certain things you gotta wear for safety reasons, but, you know, if you have the opportunity to, like, you bought these clothes, right? Like, there's nothing sacred about them. You should take care of them, but, like, please wear them. So, again, there's gonna be more pictures of me. I'm an egg. I wanted to find pictures online of other people, but, like, finding the exact thing I'm looking for is really hard to do, and half the time I just end up... I'm like, you know what? I have a picture of this exact thing I'm trying to describe. Might as well just use that. So I find there's two approaches you can take. So you can either dress up your regular outfits or dress down your Lolita ones. So when it comes to dressing up my regular outfits, I feel like I take a lot of inspiration. This is just going to be me talking about my personal style. I'm sorry. I don't know if you're going to learn anything from this. Usually I take a kind of inspiration from otome fashion, which is what I mentioned before, like way back in the 80s, of kind of this like very feminine, very girly, but not quite Lolita kind of silhouette. But yeah, love how the colors of the bow and beret connect the top half. Thank you. I tried very hard. I take a lot of the like Lolita fashion rules of kind of like, you know, maybe not the silhouette, but like a lot of the things that you learn about like color balancing and stuff. I feel like I've tried to apply that to a lot of other things as well. Because again, it's just kind of general fashion rules, right? Like, a balanced outfit is going to look nice regardless of if it's Lolita or not, right? So, yeah. So another thing I tend to do to try to get more use out of my clothes is use a lot of blouses. Because a lot of blouses have big collars, right? So, you see the picture on the right? That sweater that I'm wearing on top of that... That is from Forever 21. That is literally a sweater from Forever 21. But I wore it on top of a Lolita blouse, so I just have the collar sticking out, and yeah, I can just use that collar for anything. You know, wear it on top of, you know, wear it with anything. I think it also helps, add a frill here and there as needed. I think what I meant here was, I wear a lot of like frilly socks, frilly ankle socks, and you can also integrate wrist cuffs into other things as well, without them looking too out of place. So, you see the picture at the bottom there, that outfit, that bag is a Lolita bag. It's from Baby the Star Shine Bright. I have my frilly socks, which I probably should have ironed out the frills there, but okay. And that blouse is also a Lolita blouse. But that dress there is like the jean dress. That's from H&M. That's literally from H&M. So there are ways you can mix things in to kind of spruce up your outfits. As well as wear hats. That's my personal strategy. Wear berets, wear sun hats. If you think the berets and sun hats look a little plain, the cool thing about berets especially is that you can pin stuff to it. So sometimes like I will, like if I have a bow clip, I will attach that to the hat. If I have other pins, I can attach that to the hat. You can do a lot with berets. They're very versatile. I've come to learn. Have I missed too much? Maybe. I'm getting towards the end of this, I think. These are my last few slides. I might do Q&A at the end. But yeah. So yeah, and don't be afraid to add more accessories. Like, just add more accessories. That's self-explanatory. Yeah, as always, the VOD. And I will remember to back this one up this time. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I missed the whole thing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But yeah, so the other approach that I can take as well is instead of trying to kind of dress up my regular outfits, I can kind of try to dress down. So this is what I meant before when I was talking about casual Lolita. You can just integrate. It turns out you can wear whatever you want. You can integrate kind of non-Lolita pieces into Lolita outfits. So the example on the right here, that sweater, the pink one, the pink sweater is a sweater that I bought at a thrift store in like grade 12 and I've kept ever since, and it works well here, I think. I mean, I guess it's a matter of taste, but like it works well. That dress is a Lolita dress, but yeah. You can also use a variety of shoes, like the picture on the right, those shoes are Doc Martens, and then the one on the left, they're from Clark's, I believe. I think another thing that it helps to learn is to know what dresses look good with a petty and which ones you don't really need a petty for. Will you do a takedown of the drama in the Lolita community for part 3? Yeah, we'll take down the Western Idol community. It was fantastic. Here's the thing. I don't have any hard feelings toward anybody. That's the problem. Also, I want people to like me. I generally... I want to do more streams about this, but I'm worried that, like... I'm not scared of other people, but it's more just like, you know, I want to be on good terms. I want to be on speaking terms. I think Yaru had more qualms with the Western VTuber, or the Western idol community, where I have no drama. I have no qualms with anybody in any Lolita community, really. Everyone is fine. I don't have anything to complain about. And I don't know, I don't want to come off as a person who complains about everything, you know? I'm not a drama person. But yeah, so layering with plainer pieces. That picture on the left, the dress is from a Lolita brand. The cardigan is from Banana Republic. Like, it's really is just like, it turns out you can wear whatever you want. Cardigans, I think, are the easiest thing, because you can spice up a cardigan pretty easily. You can, like, you know, you can pin things to the front, you can wear it with, like, a collared blouse. You can integrate, like, an off-brand cardigan pretty easily. But yes, figuring out what looks good without a petty, like, what doesn't need a petty to look good is also, I think, a vital skill. Because a lot of dresses, some of the dresses look very sad without a petty. They look very sad. They look very deflated. But other ones just look fine. You know, so that's something that comes down to experience, but you will figure it out. Aren't there any conventions about Lolita fashion? Yes, although they kind of got on... A lot of them got put on hold for COVID, and then they died in the meantime, but yes, there have been some. I think RuffleCon was like a big one back in the day. I don't know if they're still around. There was another one called Paradiso, which I think died after last year. There was one in Toronto that they ran it for 1 year, and it was really good, and then COVID hit, and I don't know if they ever plan to run one again, but I want to go to that one because it sounded like a good time. But yeah, no, they do exist. They do exist. Usually they're more like overall J-fashion cons because just Lolita is a little too niche, but yep, they exist. But yeah, it's just learning to, like, figure out what things can you integrate with your Lolita pieces without it looking out of place, I guess. As I mentioned before, people keep asking about this the entire time, but there's also some other J-fashions that may interest you if you aren't interested in Lolita. So the first one, I know somebody asked about this before, is OG. I wouldn't consider myself an OG expert, but basically the concept of OG is kind of like, you know, oh, thank you, Decade the Karate Bug thing. Bugman, sorry. Thank you for spreading. But yeah, basically, OG is like, if Lolita is the princess, then OG is kind of the prince. So it's kind of like, it's not like gender swapped Lolita fashion. There's a few different things there's a few things that are definitely different when it comes to like the silhouette, but OG is kind of more princely. It's not quite the same though. The way the outfits are styled, there's a huge crossover between people who wear Lolita and people who wear OG, but like the styling is not 100% the same. OG is a little more masculine. You see a lot more hats. You see a lot more vests, a lot more like a big focus on coats, like overcoats. It's not quite the same. It's not quite the same. How many men go to these? Is there a male equivalent of Lolita fashion? I was literally just saying that. OG, again, it's kind of just boyish. It's boyish Lolita. A lot more people wear more traditional dresses. We make traveling to different countries a lot more magical. I mean, to be fair, I don't think we owe anybody a magical trip. Like, it would be cool, but also, like, we're not Disney World here. I say a lot of fans seem to want to wear it every day. I wouldn't say that's the case. I'd say most people I know who wear it only for special occasions. And then I feel like I'm what they call lifestyle Lolitas, which is like people who wear it every day. Like, they're kind of an anomaly. I would say it's a very, very small minority. Aristocrat is another one that's like tangentially related. So again, like I said, if Lolita's princessy, OG is princely, and then Aristocrat is more kings and queens. So Aristocrat is a lot more like gothic based. Usually the skirts are longer. Sometimes pants are involved. It's a lot simpler. It's a lot, maybe not simpler, but like it's not as frilly as Lolita. I guess that's my point. Again, it's heavily based in goth kind of visual kei stylings. But it is another option. There's a big crossover between people who do like gothic Lolita or like more gothic OG styles and people who do aristocrat. And by like overlap, I mean that like that's a circle. It's basically a circle. I feel like I see more tomboy and NB friends in OG rather than guys. Yeah, that's true. But I think that has more to do with the sizing. Like the sizing of OG fashion, a lot, like, brands that make it off, like, they will have men in mind, but, like, it's Japanese male sizing. It's Japanese men's sizing, and they are kind of small. So because of that, it does tend to be, at least overseas, tends to be a bit more popular among, you know, smaller women. Hime-gyaru is another one that somebody brought up earlier. So Hime-gyaru is similar. I like to say that Hime-gyaru is like what people who don't know what Lolita looks like think Lolita looks like, because it has a lot of things in common with like Lolita, especially Sweet Lolita. Like, you got a lot of pink, got a lot of pastels, got a lot of big hair pieces, lots of, you know, cute soft imagery, but it's definitely a gyaru style. Like, if you look at, you know, how the length of the skirts, the shape of the dresses, the way the hair and makeup is done, it's a gyaru style. It has elements in common, but it's definitely gyaru. Fairy Kei is another one that has a lot of overlap between them and Lolita, especially Sweet Lolita. It's a style that has like a lot of soft pastels. It has some similarities to Sweet Lolita, like there's some pieces that can be shared in between styles, but it's kind of its own thing. It's kind of the fwa kind of soft feeling with pastels. Decora is another one that you can see its influence on Lolita. Decora is basically just like, how many accessories can we pile on this and have it still look okay? Usually Decora is a lot brighter, like, there is pastel Decora, but like, usually it's based in more like bright tones, big, loud. It's a statement. It's definitely a statement. Menhera, oh boy, this one's too complicated to get into here. Yeah, Menhera is another one that's kind of become more popular over time, but I feel like there's also like misconceptions about how it should look. It's a kind of thing that's supposed to be, again, like Menhera is kind of like a Japanese slang term for like mental illness. So it's kind of like a style that's based in a lot of like medical imagery. So you see a lot of like, you know, sometimes gore, but sometimes, you know, like needles or pills or that kind of imagery. hospital kind of looking things. I think one defining characteristic of Menhera that I think a lot of people don't talk about is that if you have a fashion style that's kind of been developed by people with mental and or physical illnesses, that's meant for other people with mental and or physical illnesses to wear, it's going to be a lot simpler than you think, right? So I think a lot of people kind of when they try to integrate Menhera elements into outfits, they tend to overcomplicate it a little. Whereas you look at actual Menhera outfits, it's a lot of like baggy sweaters and long t-shirts, and it's like, yeah, if someone has trouble having the energy to get out of bed, like they're going to be wearing something simple. Like it's going to be a little simpler. But is yamikawa a synonymous term? More or less, yeah, sort of. I wouldn't say I'm an expert on it, but I have seen them used vaguely interchangeably. Syringes, yep, that's another common one. Hospital, like a lot of like hospital crosses or like hospital motifs. That's the style. JK or Nanchate Seifuku is this one I find is more popular in like Southeast Asia than it is abroad, or at least like in North America. I would say it's also not particularly popular in Japan. I think China is kind of the driving force for this one here. But basically it's kind of uniforms but make it cute. So it takes a lot of elements of like school uniforms, but it styles in a way that makes it very obvious that these are not uniforms for any actual school. So usually you'll see them sometimes, like the picture here, I guess it got cut off there, but the people in the picture are wearing like tea party shoes. So like often they'll be styled with cute shoes, or they'll be in like pastel colors, or like worn in a way that makes it obvious that this is like a fashion statement and not an actual uniform. I've been told that like in China there's also a big overlap between people who wear Lolita and people who wear that, so there is crossover. Otome is one that's a little harder to pin down, as I mentioned earlier. It has similar inspirations to Lolita, but I feel like it takes it in a different direction. So you still got like a lot of that like feminine, girly, frilly, retro, vintage inspiration, but I feel like it takes it in a more blocky direction. And I find too that it feels like I was trying to do research on this, it feels like there's two Otomes, because you have that one on the left there, like the girl with the cat's dress, where you have kind of like this like simplified Lolita aesthetic that's kind of vaguely 60s looking kind of. But as you can see, like the way the colors work for this is a little different. Like you can see her socks are not super frilly, they're more simplified, and they don't match any particular thing in the outfit in the same way that like Lolitas would want everything to be like matchy-matchy. But there's also Otome on the right, which is more like Pink House style. So Pink House is another brand that specializes in these very expensive, very elaborate, long, oversized, frilly dresses, and I love them so much. But, yeah, Pink House style is like a different silhouette. It's like a lot baggier, but it still takes that similar like frilly inspiration. Please don't tell me you're about the end. Oh boy, I have some news for you. Okay, this is the last part for real. I'm so sorry. I know some people are getting here just now, and there's always the VOD. So part 6, this is about finding communities, how to talk to other people. I'm sorry. You're not, if it makes you feel any better, you're not the only person who got here late. So finding a local comm. Good luck. In this stage, haha, good luck. Touch grass. Yeah, you gotta talk to other people, probably, unfortunately. So, most major cities will probably have one. So if you live in even like a moderately sized city, a group, at least a small group for Lolita fashion probably exists. If you live in the middle of nowhere, or if you live in a smaller town, a lot of states or countries or provinces or whatever it is for where you live usually will have one for that area, that general area. Let me get some water. Wolfie, oh no! Wolfie, no, are you also late? So yeah, unfortunately to find this, you will probably need Facebook. As I mentioned earlier when Bodega mentioned it, in the early days of the Western Lolita community, almost everything was done through LiveJournal. Then when LiveJournal kind of died, everything kind of fell apart, and they needed somewhere new to move things, and it seems the place they landed on was Facebook, and we've just been stuck there ever since. We used LiveJournal and we liked it. No, we didn't. Just start the slides all over again. I mean, my face is gonna be frozen soon because I know my phone is dying, but yeah, I've been lurking. Okay, good. Didn't miss too much. But yeah, so you're probably gonna need Facebook to find it though. That said, I find the most reliable way to find the local community is to go to conventions. If you have a local convention, or even a convention that's like even sort of near you, you're probably gonna run into someone there. That's how I actually found my local com, because they had a Facebook group. But the thing is that for various reasons, they kept having to make the Facebook group private, because there was some unsavory types that were trying to get into contact with them, so they kept privating it, which made it harder for everybody else to actually try to find it. So I actually found the group by talking to some people at a convention. And then they're like, oh, you live in this city? I'm like, yep, I've been here the whole time. But this is not, like, for my city specifically, there's been, like, a couple other people that I've actually, like, gotten into the group because they didn't realize my city even had a group because the Facebook group was so hard to find. But, yeah, this is more or less how you find local communities. Socializing on the internet. It's basically like any other hobby. Once again, unfortunately, much of it is on Facebook. Why? There aren't better alternatives. There actually are no better alternatives. So some of the major Facebook groups for this are Ruffle Chat, Big Sisters of Lolita Fashion, and Closet of Frills. So those are probably like the three biggest ones, and they're all kind of like, they serve different functions. So Ruffle Chat is basically more of like a general discussion group. Big Sisters of Lolita Fashion is specifically for people seeking like advice or feedback on their outfits, and Closet of Frills is for sharing outfit pictures specifically. There are other groups that fulfill similar functions, but these tend to be the major ones. Like, these are the biggest ones. Additionally, there are tags on TikTok and on Instagram. The problem is that, like, for obvious reasons, social media algorithms hate the word Lolita. So the tags keep having to change. So I don't know what tag they use now. I know on TikTok, like, there was Lolita, and then that one stopped being usable. So then they changed to Lolita Fashion, and then that one stopped being usable. So they switched to EGL, and then I think after a while they switched to EGL Community or EGL Fashion. Like, they keep having to jump tags as each of them become more and more useful, or like less and less useful. So because of that, I wouldn't say this is why we end up on Facebook. Okay, this is why we ended up on Facebook, because it's so hard to get anything else working. Also, just to like, TikTok and Instagram aren't really community kind of places, like, not in the same way Facebook can be, I think. And that's why we've been trapped on Facebook for the past, like, decade. Because, yeah, Instagram and TikTok are more for, like, sharing your own stuff rather than engaging with other people's stuff, in my experience. So, they exist, that's the point. I think Twitter as well has also been a space, but I think Twitter has also had similar issues, you know? Discord servers, they exist. They sure do. There are ones for specific styles, there are ones for more experienced people, there are ones for people who are new and getting into the fashion. As with any other hobby, they exist, with varying degrees of quality. Anonymous forums that shall not be named. Not recommended. End of sentence. Okay, and that's the end of the slide. That's the end of the slideshow. If this were a panel at a convention, this is probably where I would do, like, a Q&A. But I feel like I keep answering questions as I go, so I don't think that's actually going to be particularly helpful. Let me drink some water, though. Good panel. Thanks. Glad that they left me the room for 3 hours and 12 minutes so far. Again, usually when I do panels for this, it's a very, like, condensed version, because when you do panels, you got, like, what, like an hour or something? Like, you don't got that room for very long. Let me go to this screen, actually, if I want to do a Q&A. Because, yeah, it is kind of a bit of a dense You do panels? I used to, for conventions sometimes. Usually they would be very similar to this, but just faster. I would sometimes do them with other people as well. There are a lot of Lolita panels, actually, at conventions. I think my favorite one that I've been to was... there was one called, like, Lolita Horror Stories I remember I went to a few years ago that was exactly what it sounds like. People would just talk about, like, the worst things that have happened to them while wearing Lolita. And, like, the vibe of that panel just goes all over the place. Because one moment it's, like, Lolita Sexual Harassment Support Group, and then the next moment it's, like, just absolute wild stories. So that one's fun. Yeah, there's I think a lot of people tend to focus on like the teaching new people about Lolita kind of panels, and those are the kinds I like to run, but like there's definitely room for creativity. But yeah. Like, my city has theaters that gets outfits made by local shops. It would be viable to go in there and order a roughly dress. I wouldn't recommend it. Again, I think if you're trying to get Lolita, I'd recommend buying it from, like, an actual brand. And I don't say that to be, like, gatekeepy. I say that because a lot of people, especially if you're new... I know some people who are new and they're like, okay, I'm going to try and make my first piece. And even people who are super experienced with sewing, if they don't have an idea of what they're going for, it tends to not turn out quite right. Yeah, go to a specialist. But again, I would recommend, like, buying a Lolita dress that's intended for Lolita. And then if you need to get it altered for size or whatever, then get it altered. I wouldn't recommend trying to get one custom made from scratch. It's probably not going to be any cheaper, and it's probably not going to be, like, again, if the person making it if they're not familiar with how Lolita fashion is supposed to kind of, like, look and feel, it usually doesn't turn out quite right, even if they're very experienced. At least that's what I've seen. Because I've seen a lot of, like, you know, in Discords and in Facebook groups, or someone's like, hey, I made my first Lolita dress, and like the craftsmanship on it is like immaculate, but it's just like something is just not quite right about it, you know? Yeah, no need to go super hard when starting, basically. Yeah. I'd say it's actually easier to get started today than it was in previous eras, because you can, like, everything is a little cheaper. Like, you can go on Taobao and it's gonna be a bit of a pain to buy, but it's a lot cheaper than it used to be. And especially, too, I know something that somebody's pointed out is that, like, yes, dresses are still expensive, but the prices actually, over the years, haven't gone that much. They haven't gone up that much. Like, if you look at old prices, like, if you go into, like, old Gothic Lolita Bibles, and you look at, like, the new stuff for this season, and you look at the prices on it, they're pretty much on par with prices today. Which means that, like, the price of dresses has actually not gone up that much, even with inflation. Like, things are roughly the same price that they've always been, which I think is interesting. You don't see that for a lot of other things, but even if it's expensive, it's, like, comparatively, like, not as expensive as it used to be. But yeah, no, I'd recommend, like, buying from, like, buy a dress that's for Lolita, and then if you need to get it altered, get it altered. Don't try and, like, get something separate. Yeah. Primish, just Google Lolita inflation. I'm gonna slap you. I'm gonna pull out the clippers for that one. Lolita's a stable investment. Buy. I mean, okay, don't go into it looking to make an investment. I feel like that's something that actually, like, ruins the secondhand market, though. When people try to, like, buy dresses with the intent of... specifically with the intent of reselling them. Like, obviously you have scalpers the same way you do for, like, literally anything else, but you also have people who buy things that are really in demand with the intention of, like, oh yeah, this is going to be very desirable in the future and I will be able to resell it. And it's like, no, buy your clothes because you want the clothes and you want to wear the clothes. If you don't like the clothes later, then resell them, but don't buy the clothes with the intention of reselling them, you know? Yeah. Only joke host, I don't think anyone would seriously do that. You'd be surprised. Honestly, it's weird comparing the international secondhand markets with the Japanese secondhand markets, because I feel like, and this is going to be like a huge generalization and a huge exaggeration, right? But like, in general, it seems like the North American markets have a tendency to be like, oh yeah, I bought this piece It's super damaged. I'm the 5th owner of this dress. My cat peed on it. I have never washed it in my life. And I'm going to resell it for the same price that I bought it for. While you have, like, Japanese secondhand sites that are like, oh yes, I bought this dress, I wore it once, there's a tiny stain in a place that you won't even notice, so I'm gonna sell it for, like, a third of the price I bought it for. So, it's weird. I guess it's just a cultural thing of, like, Japanese secondhand goods, maybe, like, they've kind of, like, you know, there's differences in how we place value on things for Japanese versus outside of Japan. Again, I can't explain this difference. I'm sure there's an explanation for it, but it does tend to happen a lot. And yeah, sometimes too, like, certain things will be in demand. Thinking about the time that there was one print from Angelic Pretty called Honey Cake, and for whatever reason, a whole bunch of people just got really into honey cake all at the same time. And the secondhand prices for honey cake just shot through the roof for no apparent reason. Like, I think somebody, like, obviously the original dress was like 300 something, I think. At one point, I think somebody paid like well over $1,000. I can't remember what the price was, but it was well over $1,000 for honey cake. And then, like, right after they paid that much, Angelic Pretty announced a re-release for Honey Cake. So then people could get it new, and it's like, oh boy, okay, oh boy. So yeah, it really is one of those things where, like, sometimes things will just come and go. Things will become really high demand for a while. Yeah, one day I'll have Honey Cake. Hot take, Honey Cake is mid. That's my hot take. Honey Cake is mid. There's like 2 good ways to court it, because the color scheme's a little all over the place. There's like 2 good ways to wear it, because it's such a weird... The only good colorway is the yellow one. I said it. This is my controversial take. The green one looks terrible. The white one looks weird. The yellow is the only good... And maybe pink. But the yellow is the most popular colorway for a good reason. I know, but I love the tacky shit. I mean, understandable. And I guess, like, it is popular. So, like, it's not like... It's... People like this. But, yeah, every so often, you know, trends come and go. But that's like everything else. Like, we are not immune to trends. We are not immune to giving into hype. You are not immune to Angelic Pretty. But yeah, I do want to do more streams about this. I want to do like I want to do like a Zatsu where I just like go through all my dresses and just talk about each one of them. Because I feel like every time someone asks me where I buy my clothes, it's like, oh boy, how much time do you have? Because I feel like a lot of my dresses, I'm like, oh yes, this is the very long story about how I bought this dress. It's not actually that very interesting. So yeah, I want to do that. I want to also do like a stream with other people, because it turns out that like the Lolita to VTuber pipeline is a thing, and there are at least a few people off the top of my head that I know for sure either currently wear the fashion or have in the past worn the fashion. I want to see if I can do a collab stream with that, but you know, turns out you have to actually schedule things if it involves other people. Can't believe other people have the audacity to be busy at the times that I am free, or free at the times that I am busy. It's unbelievable. How dare the world not revolve around my schedule? Do you cosplay, Egg? Yes, but not very well. It's not something I'm super heavily invested in. I did it more pre-pandemic, but it's really more something that like I do with friends, rather than something that I do like as a hobby on my own. I feel like there's something about wearing Lolita fashion that feels right on me that cosplay just doesn't quite capture. I feel like every time I cosplay, I feel like I'm doing something like, I'm like, something looks just a little off. Something looks not quite right. So, yeah, I'm more of a fashion person. They should really be more considerate. SMH. My damn head. SMH my head. SMH my head. You probably look great. Well, I mean, I feel like when I went to Anime North, I cosplayed Chika from Kaguya-sama, because that was the only cosplay that I owned that still fit me. because I gained quite a bit of weight since the last time that I had cosplayed. So none of my other stuff really fits, but I feel like I looked... That was... Okay, part of it might have been because I was wearing a mask, so, like, the bottom half of my face is completely covered, so I don't need to worry about that. But, like, I feel like that was the most satisfied I had ever looked... Like, it's the most satisfied I had ever been with my own cosplay. Like, I didn't make the cosplay, but I don't know. And I didn't even put... It was, like, the least effort I put into a cosplay, but the most satisfied I'd ever been with my appearance while in cosplay. And I think part of it was, like, the mask. But I also think part of it was just, like... I don't know. I guess I stopped caring. I wore it with my glasses, because I'm like, I can't wear contacts, because I'm really bad at putting them in. So, yeah, I wore the cosplay with my glasses, and people still asked for pictures. And I think part of it might have still just been the recognizable character buff. But I don't know. I asked, like, even like when people ask for pictures, I'm like, oh yeah, do you want me to take my glasses off? And they're like, no, keep them on. And I'm like, oh, okay. I guess what people really want Chika from Kaguya-sama to do is just wear glasses. Like, yeah. I heard that comparing Lolita cosplay trend tends to upset fans of Lolita. It does, you're right. I talked about this earlier. It's just kind of one of those things where it's like, we're not dressing up as anything. Like, we're just dressing up as ourselves. And ourselves are in frilly dresses. I think the difference is that cosplay, you're looking to cosplay something specific, right? Like, either, like, a specific character or something else specific. You know, like if you're doing, like, maid cosplay or something. Whereas Lolita, there's no specific thing in mind. So, yeah. Guy who's always here, thank you for introducing yourself. But yeah, it's not a character, it's a style. Exactly. I think, too, like, treating it like a costume, I feel like also not encourages, maybe not empowers, but, like, it almost encourages rude behavior towards people who wear it, kind of thing. Like, a lot of Lolitas hate when you take pictures of them in public, because it's like, yeah, I'm just trying to go to lunch here, and you're just taking my picture to do whatever you want with it. Like, I know it's not technically illegal, but it's kind of rude, isn't it? So, personally, I don't mind pictures being taken of me, just because, like, what am I gonna do? Stop you? Like, I don't, like, I'm a person wearing something unusual in public. Like, it's kind of to be expected, but also, like, bro, don't do that. Just don't. If you want a picture, just ask. Like, but, you know. It is what it is. It is what it is. Yeah, it seems fairly. At least ask first. Yeah. I think, like, again, I feel like a lot of people, when they're first wearing the fashion, they kind of mistake curiosity for malice. Like, because, yeah, you are wearing something unusual. But just because you're like, hey, what are you wearing? I don't think that's an inherently hostile question. I think that's just, you know, what are you wearing? This is unusual. I have never seen it before. Please tell me more about it. Is there something else going on with it? Like, a lot of questions we get is, are you in a play? Or is there, like, a play going on? We get that a lot. Yeah, cosplay isn't consent, etc. Yeah, exactly. It's the same principles, kind of, you know? Just don't be a bad person. It's not that hard. I think the main issue is just kind of, I guess, entitlement, probably. Like, just because you see somebody doing something unusual in public doesn't mean that you're, like, entitled to take a picture or to, like, yell at them or to comment on what they're doing. Like, sometimes people are just, we're doing an unusual thing in public, and that's fine. Be nice, exactly. Be nice and good. Nice and good. But yeah, I guess if there's nothing else to say, I can probably raid. And I think I have somebody to raid. Oh yeah, that's gonna... Okay, that'll be perfect. So... Mom, look at this egg. Can't believe there's an egg in public. There's an egg in public. Man, the egg's weird looking. There's a weird looking egg out here. Yes, there's an eggy. Yes, it's very enlightening, though I didn't see a ton. Thank you, Eggy. Yeah, the VOD will still be up. I will try to remember to archive this one, or at least, like, archive it to YouTube, so it will be visible forever. Yes. Lovely stream, Eggy. It was nice to catch you streaming. Yeah, I mean, I know some of you haven't been around for a while because I moved to a new time slot, so I know that 10 a.m., like, the morning isn't ideal for everybody, but I found that I'm enjoying it a lot more. And I feel like it's a lot more convenient for people in different time zones as well. And also, too, like, I don't feel like I'm competing with every other VTuber on Earth, because I feel like a lot of people have this time slot. But yeah, there's a lot of pros. I can have more time in the evening open for collabs and stuff. Cool and good. What time zone are you in? Eastern. Eastern time. I'm in Ontario, Canada. Eastern time. Yes, thank you for the fun lecture. But yes, thank you for being here. I never know exactly how much of my viewers actually want to hear about this, but it is something I can talk about for a very long time, so I got that going for me. So I think what we're going to raid is somebody else who I know wears the fashion, or at least did at one point. So I feel like it's appropriate to raid her. And it is... It's Picky. He's Peaky. He's Peaky. Peaky, don't tell her I said this, but she is one of my, like, when I think about, like, people to possibly invite if I ever do a collab about this, she is one of the people I want to invite. You know, only if she wants to. Only if she wants to. Also, if you're an art friend and you want to draw this stuff, yeah. Yeah, it's good to know kind of the reasoning behind different things, right? It's always good to draw people in frilly things. But yeah, no, so I will be back tomorrow morning because I double booked myself. So, I finish streaming tonight, I wake up tomorrow, I stream. But tomorrow morning is a more normal stream. I'm gonna be streaming Omori. It's a normal game stream. That's the stream happening tomorrow morning. So I guess see you then. And look at my cool end card.